Chapter 1161. Yin-yang, sooner or later, there will be a war for seizing the heavens between humans and the demon race. Hui Yinfeng panted. No matter what level your cultivation base has reached, you can't take it lightly. In the future, you must cultivate the experience of fighting against the demon race as soon as possible. That will be the mainstream of the war in the future, and it's also the greatest capital to save your life. Yin-yang nodded repeatedly. In all fairness, your cultivation base is already very high in the peaceful times, and it's enough to be used. Hui Yinfeng said. But now that chaos is coming, it's far from enough. You must at least advance to the level of a saint to have a basic guarantee of safety. Cultivators at the level of Saint King and Saint Venerable basically have no chance of avoiding this war. And the strength of these two levels is the level at which they are most likely to die in this war. It's not too much to say that they are cannon fodder. Hui Yinfeng looked at Yin-yang warmly. After this encounter, we will never meet again. Is there anything you don't understand about your cultivation? I want to know how big the gap between the levels is. This topic has long existed in every stage of the cultivation journey, but I want to have a clearer understanding of the strength of those who haven't reached the level yet. Yin-yang asked. This was something he had never been very clear about. You have had another opportunity in the fifth heaven this time, and your cultivation base has broken through again. Now, you should have just broken through to the fourth level of Saint King. Hui Yinfeng looked at Yin-yang carefully. What do you think is the gap between a fourth level Saint King and a third level Saint King? Yin-yang pondered for a while and said, although I'm only a beginner fourth level Saint King now, and my foundation hasn't been completely stabilized, I already feel that I'm at least 4 times stronger than when I was a third-level Saint King. Hui Yinfeng laughed. That's what I mean. A second-level Saint King is more than twice as strong as a first-level Saint King. A third-level Saint King is about 3 times as strong as a second-level Saint King, and a fourth-level Saint King is 4 to 10 times as strong as a third-level Saint King. You feel about 4 times as strong as a third-level Saint King, probably because you're only a beginner. When you reach the peak, the difference in strength will be more obvious. Actually, logically speaking, if you've just broken through, you should feel that your strength is unprecedentedly strong, but the specific feeling shouldn't be this strong. It should be a matter of your innate talent that makes you much stronger than others. Generally speaking, if a 4th-grade Saint King fights against a 3rd-grade Saint King, if one does not use any unique techniques, he would basically be able to defeat his opponent within 3 moves. Where is the Lord? You are wrong. Between Holy Venerate and Holy King, there is another level called Holy Emperor. There is a huge gap between a Saint King and a Saint Emperor. At the level of a Saint Emperor, the difference in strength between a Saint King and a Saint Emperor is at least 10 times greater. But when one reaches the Saint Venerable level, the difference between them and a Saint Emperor is almost 100 times greater. Basically, a single finger can crush them to death. In the eyes of a heavenly Venerable, a heavenly Emperor is just an ant. As for the stages above Holy Exalted, the gap between each stage is even greater. Moreover, it will only be more difficult to break through each stage. As for the level of Saint Monarchs, basically, they already have an immortal body. As long as they haven't broken through to the half-saint realm, even if a 4th-grade Saint Monarch were to fight against a 1st-grade Saint Monarch, although it would be as easy as flipping one's hand to crush the other, a part of the Saint Monarch's true spirit would still be able to escape no matter what. In the future, they would be able to make a comeback. Hui Yinfeng smiled and said, I am currently an intermediate 2nd-grade Saint Venerable, but the Golden Condor King is a peak 2nd-grade Saint Venerable. It seems like we are in the same stage, but when we really fight, the gap is like heaven and earth. Do you understand? I understand, Yin-yang said in a low voice. The so-called surpassing level battle can only take place in the lower stages. Perhaps it is because of the difference in the cultivator's cultivation method, or because of the ingenuity of their techniques. However, when it comes to the higher stages, the surpassing level victory is not almost impossible. It is absolutely impossible. No matter what kind of genius, what kind of special cultivation method, or ingenious technique, It is difficult to reverse this rule. This is because all the cultivators who can reach the level of a saint venerable are God's favored ones, and each of them has their own unique skills and secret arts. It is wishful thinking to try to make up for their shortcomings with something other than cultivation base. It is true that your residence of 9 Supremes has many genius disciples, which is enviable. It is not uncommon for someone to kill an opponent stronger than him or herself, and it is even common. But this kind of confidence does not apply to cultivators above the level of a heavenly emperor or a heavenly venerable. You must be careful to dispel this kind of confidence when the time is right, Hui Yunfeng said seriously. In the past, many geniuses died at the level of a saint king, and 90% of the reason is because of this. Yin Yang sucked in a deep breath and said, I will remember this even more seriously. I will not slack off in the slightest. In fact, when he heard this, he had already broken out in a cold sweat. Not only his disciples, but even Yin Yang himself had been fighting opponents of a higher level in almost every battle for so many years. This kind of understanding that it was not a big deal to kill someone one level higher had long been deeply rooted in Yin Yang's heart. He was really used to it, even to the extent that it had become second nature. But as Hui Yunfeng said, this kind of mentality must be correctly understood. If he were to blindly hold on to this mentality, he would suffer a great loss sooner or later. When it came to the battle between heavenly emperors and heavenly venerables, a moment of carelessness could lead to death, and suffering a great loss might mean leaving this world forever. With trembling hands, Hui Yunfeng took off the ring on his finger and stuffed it into Yin Yang's hand. He grasped Yin Yang's hand tightly and said, Yin Yang, send this back to the Sacred Heart Palace for my family. I will. My family? My wife died in the hands of the demon clan 2,000 years ago. Among my 5 concubines, 2 died of old age, and the other 2 died in the martial world. Of my 13 sons, 11 died in the hands of the demon clan. 1 died due to a cultivation accident, and only 1 is still alive, but he looks older than my father. I have a lot of grandchildren and great-grandchildren. It can be considered a big family. With my death, the family will lose its pillar and anchor. The decline is inevitable. Ask them to move out of the Sacred Heart Palace as soon as possible and find a place to live next to it. In this way, there will be people who will often remember our past friendship, and they will owe us a favor. But if they still live in my house as a high official, others will think that they don't owe us anything at all. That will be bad for them, and it will further worsen the family's decline. When people die, they leave. When people leave, the tea cools. This is an ancient truth. Don't take chances. Hui Yunfeng smiled slightly and looked calm. As a person, never resent that the tea cools when people leave, because the tea cools when you leave first. There are many seniors who are much more powerful than you. When they leave, the tea cools and can no longer be drunk, and it might even be poisoned. There are also some high-ranking people who not only let the tea cool after they leave, but they even spilled it. If you don't want the tea to cool, you have to stay. Hui Yunfeng chuckled. I'm destined to fail. But while the tea is still warm, let them find a way to settle down as soon as possible. This is the key to the continuation of the family. Yin Yang thought for a while and said solemnly, I will bring your painstaking efforts to them. At this moment, Hui Yunfeng's face was already covered in golden light. Obviously, the corrosion of the metallographic qi was getting more and more serious. From now on, you can throw me out or put me down at any time. The Sacred Heart Palace is too far from here. It's impossible for you to outrun the Golden Condor King if you take me with you. Besides, I don't have much energy left to suppress the metallographic qi in my body, so I'm not sure if it will spread to you. Don't worry, Senior. I've already taken precautions against the spread of the metallographic qi. I just don't know what the Golden Condor King wants to do, Yin Yang asked. It's hard to say. Hui Yunfeng's face was solemn. He must have a purpose, and his plan must be huge, so we must be careful. We can't be too careful on the way to the Sacred Heart Palace this time. This area is not too far from the demon race's territory. It's no more than 15,000 miles on foot. With the Golden Condor King's speed, he can fly back in 2 hours if no saint stops him. Even if there are experts stopping him, it's impossible for the Golden Condor King to not receive him at all. He's so arrogant, so he must have a strong backup plan. That's why he's so fearless. The Sacred Heart Palace holds a battle of the Celestial Banner every 3 years. The conditions are extremely harsh, and the true meaning of this is nothing more than to select the most elite combat force to fight against the demon race in the future. You must take a long-term view. You will be the final line of defense to protect the human race in the bound of universe. In Yin Yang's deific consciousness space, Yin Yang anxiously asked Emmy, "Emmy, is there a way to treat this injury?" Yin Yang had always valued people who valued brotherhood. He had treated the 10 court Yama kings like this in the Tianxian continent, and the Demiurge Flawed 10, and the others when he came to the bound of universe. Now that he saw that Hui Yunfeng was also a person who did not hesitate to die for his brother, he could not help but have a good impression of him, and wanted to save him. Aya. Emmy was speechless. You can't. Aya. Emmy looked troubled. It was very different from how it used to be when there was nothing it could not do, and everything was under its control. There's a way. But is it difficult? Yin Yang's eyes lit up. He was not afraid of difficulty, but he was afraid that there was no way. As long as there was a way, it would be fine. Aya. Emmy's soft voice became more and more troubled. Its branches and leaves waved weakly, and its vines were twisted and shapeless. It looked very dispirited. You mean, even if you do your best to save him, you still can't cure him? Aya. You have a way to keep him alive, but you can't guarantee how long he can live. I can maintain the status quo and maintain his vitality. I can't move, or even circulate my cultivation base after that. As long as I move my mystical qi, the metallic qi will devour my whole body and I'll die. Yin Yang's eyes suddenly turned cold. It was naturally a good thing to have a way to cure him, but as a high-level cultivator, it had almost become an instinct for him to circulate his mystical qi all the time. To abandon his cultivation base like a great cultivator, like Hui Yunfeng, was more difficult than killing him. Aya. Is it true that I can't use any mystical qi anymore? I can't use even the slightest bit of it? Yin Yang confirmed it again and again, but he could not help but hesitate, wondering if he should tell Hui Yunfeng the good news. My body is being eroded more and more by the metallic qi. The Golden Condor King's divine skill is indeed terrifying. Hui Yunfeng felt his body getting heavier and heavier. Then he looked at his palm, and found that the golden light was becoming more and more obvious. He sighed and said, I, Hui Yunfeng, didn't expect my dead body to be so valuable. F***ck, this is a real golden body. If one of my arms is cut off, I'm afraid it will be enough for the secular people to live a life without worrying about food and drink. Yin Yang's heart grew heavier and heavier. He said in a low voice, Senior Hua, I have a way to keep you alive, but Hui Yunfeng's eyes suddenly lit up. He looked at Yin Yang and asked, What is it? I have a strange poison from the lower realm. This poison has a special property, and is good at restraining the metallic qi, Yin Yang said. After you eat it, you can suppress the Golden Condor King's vicious attack, and stop it from worsening. However, this poison doesn't dissolve the metallic qi, but instead forms a state of balance with it. When you survive, Senior Hua, you will never be able to use mystical qi again for the rest of your life. Hui Yunfeng's eyes lit up when he heard this. It's good that I survive. Can I remove the strange poison and the metallic qi from my body by dispersing all my cultivation base? Yin Yang shook his head and said, The balance between the poison and the metallic qi is not connected to the mystical qi of Senior's cultivation base, but to your body. In other words, Senior's cultivation base is still there, but you can't use it. Even if you use a little bit of it, you will immediately trigger a backlash and die. Hui Yunfeng's expression immediately became complicated. He was not worried that Yin Yang would deceive him, because there must be a strange medicine that could save his life. But the more he thought so, the more uncomfortable he felt. A Supreme Saint expert's mystical qi was as vast as the ocean. It was fine for a while, but how could he control himself to not use any mystical qi at all times? Compared to not being able to use any mystical qi, Hui Yunfeng was not afraid of dispersing his cultivation base for a while. With his cultivation base and wealth, Even if he temporarily dispersed his cultivation base, he could naturally return to his peak, as long as there was a buffer period. If I can't use mystical chi at all, I'll die as soon as I use it. Isn't that worse than being a cripple? Hui Yunfeng murmured. But I can still live. As long as I live, there will be hope. Not necessarily. Although he said so, the expression on his face was incomparably complicated and ferocious. It was difficult for him to make up his mind. Let's live for the time being. After a while, Hui Yunfeng chuckled horribly. It's better to live a bad life than to die a good death. The world is vast and magical. I'm destined to die, but with the help of your miraculous medicine, even if I'm struggling at death's door, it's still worth it. Ha ha ha. All right. Having made up his mind, Yun Yang immediately communicated with Emmy in his deific consciousness space and put his plan into action. Emmy looked like it was in a dilemma, waving its tendrils unwillingly, twisting and turning. Emmy, I'll get it back for you later, Yun Yang said in a low voice. I don't want to watch such a person die. I can't let him die like this. Yeah. Emmy's leaves drooped as it stretched one of its vines to Yun Yang's hand and scratched his palm listlessly. Just a piece of vine. Emmy twisted its vines in a fit of pique. What was Emmy? It was a spiritual root that could split heaven and earth apart. Obtaining a part of Emmy was a rare opportunity. What kind of abnormality couldn't it deal with? Yun Yang was really not in the mood to comfort Emmy. He pinched off the tip of Emmy's vine, but he could clearly feel Emmy twitching violently. Yun Yang could not help feeling distressed and flustered. This seemed to be the first time Emmy had lost a limb since it was born. Then he saw Emmy curl up. Suddenly, a few spiritual herbs around them pulled their roots out of the soil and fled in panic. Emmy let out a tender cry, causing all the spiritual herbs to stop in their tracks and tremble. Then with a swoosh, countless spiritual chi surged toward Emmy in a whistling manner. Yun Yang watched the sudden turn of events with his mouth agape. The tip of Emmy's vine that had just been pinched off was growing back at a speed that could be seen with the naked eye. But the thousands of spiritual herbs around it had withered uniformly. They looked like young wives who had been bullied, looking pitiful and aggrieved. Yun Yang was dumbstruck. Emmy's tiny vine tip actually required such a huge amount of resources? Wait, there was still a little fellow taking advantage of the situation and reaping the benefits. Gigi had been under Emmy's leaves for a long time. Now that the spiritual chi was pouring in, a portion of it was affected as well. Gigi's bald wings spread out, and its head tilted. With a bayubiu sound, a colorful feather popped out of its butt. A bayubiu sound was heard on its head as well, a fleshy bud popping out on top of its bald head. It complemented the original fleshy bud perfectly. There had been a hair on its butt, and a fleshy bud on its head. Now there were 2 fleshy buds on its head, and 2 hairs on its butt. One of them was gray while the other was colorful. Was this change a big one, or a very small one? It seemed to be very subtle. Yun Yang's eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. Was there such a thing? The little fellow raised its head and lifted its butt proudly, its 2 hairs swaying left and right as it paced back and forth. It actually looked a little ladylike. He could not bear to look at it. With a countermeasure in hand, Yun Yang had no hesitation. He raised his hand and slapped the back of Hui Yunfeng's head. It was best to knock him unconscious before feeding him such a peculiar thing. Otherwise he would have to explain it to him. Puff! Hui Yunfeng raised his head in confusion and looked at Yun Yang with a puzzled expression. Why did you hit me? Looking at his hand, Yun Yang was speechless. Although I did not use my full strength in this slap, even a Saint King level bear would be knocked unconscious. This fellow was clearly injured and on the verge of death. So how could he still receive this slap, as if nothing had happened? So my cultivation base is still so shallow and weak? Ahem, it's nothing. Yin Yang laughed dryly, and continued to go with the flow. Hui Yunfeng touched his head with a gloomy expression. The Lord's head is not something you can hit so casually. I'm really speechless. Just as he was thinking. Puff! Another slap. This time, Yun Yang used a little more strength, and almost went all out. So the effect was much greater than before. Hui Yunfeng's head was immediately pushed into the water by the slap. Then he rose from the water with a splash and said furiously, You, What are you doing? Yun Yang's face was twisted. After a while he murmured, Why? Why aren't you unconscious? Why should I? I've hit you so hard. Why aren't you unconscious? You're just a mere Saint King. Yet you want to knock me out? Are you stupid? Hui Yinfeng was surprised. Aren't you seriously injured and dying? Yun Yang was speechless. Even if I'm dying, as long as I'm still breathing, you can't knock me out. Hui Yinfeng looked gloomy. With your cultivation base, Yun Yang sighed. The current situation is that I can't use medicine if you don't faint. Hui Yinfeng was speechless. If you don't faint? Yun Yang racked his brains. When the medicine takes effect, it will attack the deific consciousness. I'm worried that it will turn you into an idiot. The main thing is, do you think I'm an idiot? What's the point of talking about the main thing and the secondary thing with me? Hui Yinfeng was extremely depressed. If you don't want me to see or know, I'll just close my eyes. Or I'll pass out on my own. What a lame excuse. Then you can pass out on your own. Yun Yang said sheepishly. Hui Yinfeng looked at Yun Yang speechlessly. Then he sighed and closed his eyes. After a while, his head tilted to one side, and he successfully passed out. Yun Yang felt like billions of divine beasts were trampling back and forth in his stomach. Damn it! This is so King fake. In the underground river, Hui Yinfeng, who had regained consciousness, was in a much better state of mind. After all, the shackles of death had been removed, but his face was still ashen and he kept sighing. Before I took that miraculous medicine of yours, when I was in a precarious situation, I always felt that it would be better to live than to die. But now, after taking the medicine and saving my life, I feel that it would be better to just die. People are really not satisfied. Didn't you always say that as long as you're alive, there's hope and there may be a better solution in the future? Just like you mentioned before, a saint cultivator can help you get rid of the metal manifestation qi. The current situation can't be any worse than that. Hui Yinfeng smiled and was about to speak when he heard a firm voice say, That's right, but it's a pity that it doesn't apply to the two of you anymore. Deacon Hua, your life has come to an end. You're destined to have no future. Shocked, the two turned to look in the direction of the voice and saw a golden figure standing on the other side of the underground river with his hands behind his back, his eyes locked on them. The Golden Condor King. The Golden Condor King had actually found this place. Genius. 1 second to remember this site's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1162. Yin Yang's heart sank abruptly. He had been too careless. He had been too careless. Escaping from the underground river was the best way to deal with the situation and make it difficult for the enemy to track him down. But when he thought about it carefully, he realized that there would always be traces of him falling into the underground river. How could the Golden Condor King not have found it? With the Golden Condor King's cultivation base and strength, he could have followed the underground river since he had discovered it. He should have given up following the current the moment he fell into the underground river and turned to go against the current to escape from it. That would have been the safest plan. How could he have been caught up like this? Was he left with no choice but to face him head-on? Hui Yinfeng was silent for a moment before he suddenly smiled. Perhaps my previous path is indeed destined to be cut off, but I still have to thank God for giving me the opportunity to repay you. Let's see if my last attack can surprise you enough. Yun Yang, I'll leave it to you in the future. After saying that, he took a step forward and took a deep breath. Facing the Golden Condor King, he smiled faintly and said, Golden Condor King, accompany me on my way here today. It was obvious that he was going to launch his mystical qi one last time, or even self-destruct to fight for a chance for Yun Yang to escape. With Hui Yinfeng's cultivation base, Yun Yang's chances of escaping were very high if he went to extremes. Yun Yang thought quickly and shouted in a low voice, Senior, please wait. We may still have a chance. He then turned to the Golden Condor King and said, Golden Condor King, it's really beyond my expectation that you could find this place. It shows your wisdom, but have you really lost your child? The Golden Condor King immediately recognized the voice and grinned hideously. So you're the one who pretended to be Hui Yinfeng to help me find my child. The heavens really didn't let me down, and let me get rid of two people I must eliminate at once. Hua Yinfeng turned to look at Yin Yang in confusion. What's going on? I don't understand. What impersonation? Who's impersonating me? It doesn't matter who I am, and who is Hua Yinfeng. At least it doesn't matter to you, does it? Yin Yang said faintly. The Golden Condor King nodded slowly. That's right. It's indeed not important. What I care about now is that no matter who you are, and whether you are Hua Yinfeng or not, you are destined to die. Don't you want your child anymore? Yin Yang said in a low voice. Or perhaps your so-called search for the child was just a pretense from the beginning? The Golden Condor King laughed sinisterly. These are not things that a person like you, who is destined to die, should worry about. What you should be thinking about right now is how you're going to walk the path of the underworld. Yin Yang laughed. You want to kill me? You dare to kill me? Can you kill me? The Golden Condor King looked at Yin Yang mockingly, after hearing the barrage of questions. Shouldn't I kill you? Why wouldn't I dare to kill you? Do you think I will give you the time to cast a protective array formation? There's no harm in telling you the truth. Even if you were to cast the array formation from the last time, this king will continue attacking. Let's see how long you can last. Yin Yang smiled faintly. When he opened his palm, a purple jade flute appeared in his hand. The jade flute's entire body was smooth and glossy, giving off an indescribable sense of elegance. There was a small pendant at the end of the jade flute. The pendant was shaped like a small house swinging in the air. It was small and exquisite, but it looked magnificent. Yin Yang took out the purple jade flute, but he sighed inwardly. The current situation was already very bad. He could only use this last life-saving method to deal with the current situation, which was to summon the residence of 9 Supremes and hide in it with Hua Yinfeng. Only then could he ensure his safety. Apart from this, there was no other way to deal with the current crisis. Yin Yang was absolutely unwilling to use this method, because this was his final and greatest trump card. If Hua Yinfeng was not by his side, Yin Yang would rather choose to launch his manifestation powers. As long as he could find an opening, the Golden Condor King would never be able to take him down no matter how fast he was. However, with Hua Yinfeng around, this method was doomed to fail. Just as he was about to summon the residence of 9 Supremes to the bound of universe, he was shocked to see the purple jade flute suddenly emit a faint purple light. This faint purple light suddenly appeared in the dark underground, but the entire underground river was illuminated by this faint light, as if it was covered with a layer of dreamy luster. Then, as if it had a life of its own, the purple jade flute flew up from Yin Yang's hand and hovered quietly in the air. The purple light shone on the Golden Condor King's face. The Golden Condor King narrowed his eyes. The faint purple light suddenly made his eyes extremely uncomfortable, and tears streamed down his cheeks. Hua Yinfeng was shocked. Looking at the purple jade flute, he had no idea what was going on. Yin Yang was at a loss as well, but then, his gaze turned into surprise. Looking at the purple light, he actually felt like crying. In the purple light, a leisurely voice said, "So it's a golden condor." As soon as the voice rang out, all the water in the underground river stopped flowing. Not only did the underground river stop flowing, but all the spiritual qi in the air also stopped flowing at the same time. No, it was as if the entire heaven and earth had stopped moving at this moment. At the same time, the Golden Condor King's face was filled with horror, for he keenly felt that he could not move his body at all. He could not even move his fingers or blink his eyes. Horrified, he tried his best to circulate his cultivation method and mobilize his physical strength, wanting to regain control of his body and return to his original form, so that he could fly away at top speed. However, it was a pity that nothing was old. He couldn't even activate a single drop of inner energy, let alone anything else. He could only stand motionlessly on the spot. The moment he thought of this, he was so scared that he lost his ability to think. He clearly did not feel any aura, so why couldn't he move? Moreover, his eyes kept tearing up, and he could not stop them. The elegant voice said slowly, "Little Golden Condor is quite fierce." The voice was elegant and graceful, and there was a hint of a smile in it. However, the Golden Condor King was scared out of his wits at this moment. If he could move, he would have been trembling like an old sow, a ray of light flashed, and a hand slowly reached out from the light. The fingers of the hand were slender, fair, and delicate, like the fingers of a pampered lady. The sleeves that appeared were moon-white in color, and the texture was extraordinarily soft, as if they could melt in the air at any time. With a light wave of the hand, the golden condor king's stiff body was sent flying. Plop, plop, plop. He had actually used his body to pierce through the mountain rock that was thousands of feet high, directly breaking through the entire mountain, and flying to who knew how far away. Yin Yang and Hui Yinfeng were overjoyed to see this. The voice said faintly, "Come back." The next moment, the golden condor king's skeletal body reappeared in its original spot. It was still standing proudly with its hands clasped behind its back, but its eyes were filled with a pleading expression. It was as if it had died. The golden condor king felt that his body had regained the ability to move, and a myriad of pain assaulted him at the same time. However, he did not even dare to make a sound, much less move. With the other party's terrifying might that was capable of completely restraining him, and even confining the three realms, as soon as he appeared, acting rashly would be courting death. Moreover, the technique he used to summon him back through space was definitely a technique of the mythical realm, and it wasn't even that exaggerated. The leisurely voice said faintly, "Kneel here. Kneel for 3 days and 3 nights." The golden condor king dared not hesitate at all. He knelt down with his back straight. He did not dare to not kneel, and he did not even dare to hesitate for a moment. Demonic beasts were the most realistic creatures. They had an instinctive reverence for living beings that were stronger than them, and the golden condor king knew very well what kind of person he had encountered. The person in front of him had not even revealed his aura, and his true body was unknown even from tens of thousands of miles away. Just a slight movement of his divine sense was enough to cause such power. In the golden condor king's impression, even the supreme demon emperor of the demon race did not have such strength. In the face of such an existence, the golden condor king did not have the slightest intention to resist. The other party did not even need to make a move. With just a thought, he could kill the golden condor king thousands of times. The hand slowly retracted into the light, and then the light disappeared as if it had never existed. It was not until the light completely disappeared that the sound of rushing water could be heard again, and the aura of the stopped space resumed its flow. Yun Yang and the others were shocked as they stared at the underground river. What had happened just now was still the same. It was not that the flow had become bigger after it stopped freezing, but that there was no change at all. What did this mean? What had been frozen just now was not caused by the extreme cold, but had directly frozen space, or perhaps even frozen time itself. The purple jade flute slowly descended from the air and landed in Yun Yang's hand. The golden condor king was still kneeling on the shore, not daring to move a muscle. He watched Yun Yang and Hui Yinfeng float down the river with the whites of his eyes. His body had regained its full mobility, but he still did not dare to move a muscle as he watched the two leave. Beads of sweat rolled down his face, and his heart was filled with lingering fear. That voice had said that he would kneel for 3 days and 3 nights. The golden condor king didn't dare take any chances at this time. After this incident, the golden condor king was likely to fall ill. As long as he saw the beautiful girlish Lao Ai again, he would most likely be instinctively terrified, scared out of his wits, and lose all will to fight. The golden condor king was not the only one who was absent-minded. Yin Yang's mind was also blank. Even after going downstream for a long time, he still could not think of anything. He was still dazed and speechless for a long time. Hui Yinfeng's condition was not much better, and he was even worse than Yun Yang's. His face had turned as white as snow, and he whispered in shock, "Sect leader Yin, is this your master?" As he spoke, he wore an expression of extreme reverence and shock. Even Hui Yinfeng couldn't imagine how high the cultivation base of the person who spoke was. Hui Yinfeng knew that Yin Yang had a master with a mysterious background and extraordinary cultivation base, but he could not imagine who this person was, and what level this cultivator was at to possess such terrifying strength. Even the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace did not have such strength. Although the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace's strength was also unfathomable, and beyond Hui Yinfeng's knowledge, He was still in the realm of legend, and there were still traces to be found. However, that Lao AI just now, that moment of grace, was truly unearthly and unimaginable. It was truly a divine creation. Yun Yang was still in a daze. After a long while he asked, "What?" Hui Yunfeng asked again. "This is." Yun Yang came back to his senses and sighed softly. "Yes, that's my master. But this is also the first time I've seen my master in action. Alas, compared to him, I'm really far from being able to compare." Hui Yunfeng said respectfully. "It's not just far from being able to compare. It's not even comparable, okay? He's clearly a deity-like figure. No, I should say that he's a deity. Sect leader Yin, it's really your good fortune to have such a master." When the two of them got out of the underground river and went to the boundless mountains, Yun Yang had already returned to normal, but Hui Yunfeng was still in shock. Even the gaze he used to look at Yun Yang was filled with awe and admiration. Based on his experience, Hui Yunfeng guessed that the person who made the sound was Yun Yang's master, and his cultivation base was so high that he had never seen it before. Even the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace and the experts of the Eastern Celestial Palace were far inferior to Yun Yang's master. In fact, there was no comparison at all. The highest level that Hui Yunfeng knew was the so-called Saint Realm, which was the highest level in this world. Based on Hui Yunfeng's knowledge, it seemed that Yun Yang's master was at least at that level, or even higher. Yun Yang was also very silent along the way. He had been thinking about one thing. Is the person who made the sound my father? It should be, right? On the way to Sacred Heart Palace, there were no more unforeseen events. It was not until 5 days later when he arrived at the gates of the Sacred Heart Palace that he received a shocking piece of news. 1 day ago, the Golden Condor King had, for some unknown reason, revealed his true form and fled at top speed. He was as anxious as a stray dog and as panicky as a fish that had escaped the net. A journey of 108,000 miles would normally take a day to cover, but this time, the Golden Condor King had rushed with all his might and returned in less than half a day. He did not even care about the 8 demon generals under his command. This action had directly caused the 8 demon generals to be besieged and attacked by the experts of Sacred Heart Palace, and as many as 5 of them had fallen. The Golden Condor King's posture of fleeing, the kind of eagerness to unleash all his life potential and consume half of his life, puzzled everyone. But no one was chasing after him. Why was he running? Genius 1 second to remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 1163. In the Sacred Heart Palace. Yun Yang looked at the mountain range, a sense of awe rising within him. Previously, when he looked at it from the outside, he only saw a few pavilions and pavilions that occupied an area of at most a few acres. However, after entering, he realized that this place was at least a few thousand miles wide. There were mountains and valleys that stretched on endlessly. Clouds and mist floated back and forth. It was like a paradise on earth. The spiritual qi here was so rich that even Yun Yang felt suffocated. From time to time, a dense mass of spiritual qi would rush over and drizzle spiritual liquid over his head. Wherever he breathed, he could smell the spiritual qi that could make his cultivation base advance by leaps and bounds. Heaven and earth treasures were everywhere he looked, and auspicious clouds surrounded him. He could hear the sound of pines rustling and the wind whistling. The Sacred Heart Palace is really a good place. Hearing that Hui Yunfeng had returned, Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning came out to greet him with surprise on their faces. They were so excited that they almost fainted. They hugged Hui Yunfeng with tears on their faces, crying, laughing, shouting, and screaming. The Saint Venerable state they had cultivated for many years was gone at this moment. Pu Des Huang and the others also hurried out. The moment he saw Hui Yunfeng, Pu Deshuang's face was full of surprise, but he cursed. I knew this scourge was not dead. This old B***starred. A scourge that lives for thousands of years. Why didn't you just F***king die outside? Bastard. Then I don't have to pay my debt. The other 2 attendants shook their heads angrily and said, I'm so disappointed. I'm so disappointed. Hui Yunfeng laughed and said, You want me dead? Are you blind? Let me tell you, there's no way you can go back on your word. I knew you were going to go back on your word, so I didn't die anyway. Ha ha ha. Everyone laughed, not taking it seriously at all. Then, they stepped forward and thanked him for escorting Hu Yunfeng back. 5 or 6 attendants enthusiastically accompanied Yun Yang to the place where he stayed. Then, they called their friends and began to hold a banquet. All kinds of spiritual fruits and wine were brought out like flowing water. Hu Yunfeng, on the other hand, went straight to the hall of the temple master. How was it? Pu Deshuang looked at Yun Yang and asked with a smile. It was very dangerous along the way, wasn't it? It's said that the Golden Condor King personally came out to kill you. Us brothers were so anxious that the temple master immediately sent 200 people to meet you. But they only managed to kill a few golden condors. How did you come back? Didn't you meet the Golden Condor King? Yun Yang cursed inwardly. What do you mean by hunting us? I'm clearly going to hunt Hu Yunfeng of the Golden Condor. It's a rare for me to be a good person, but I wasted a lot of effort. F***ck. If you only wanted to hunt me down, I would have long since used my various manifestations to escape. As for exposing my ultimate trump card, the purple jade flute, I even had to hint to that old man Hu Yunfeng to keep it a secret. It's rare for me to be a good person, but I wasted so much effort. Yun Yang's mind was racing, but his expression was neither servile nor overbearing. He recounted his encounters along the way in detail. When he told them that Hu Yunfeng had been struck by the Golden Condor King's mortal-to-metal technique, and that he had used fight poison with poison to cure Hu Yunfeng, they all looked dejected when he told them that Hu Yunfeng could no longer use mystical qi after being struck by the Golden Condor King's mortal-to-metal technique, and that he had cast fight poison with poison treatment on him. Each of them had the cultivation base of a supreme saint, so they naturally knew what it meant for a cultivator of the same level to be unable to use mystical qi for the rest of his life. After that, he would become an existence even worse than a cripple. Hu Yunfeng only hurried over when he was half drunk. He wanted to get drunk and vent the frustration that had accumulated in the past few days. The temple master has appointed me as the deputy supervisor of the Sacred Heart Palace's internal affairs. From now on, the martial world has nothing to do with me anymore. Hu Yunfeng's voice was filled with an indescribable sense of loss. Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning sat silently on the side, not knowing what to say. Yun Yang was also silent for a long time. After getting out of danger, Yun Yang had asked Emmy about Hu Yunfeng's physical condition in detail, especially whether there was a possibility of curing him, but Emmy's answer was mixed. Emmy told Yun Yang that there were at least 3 effective methods to eliminate the hidden metal qi in Hu Yunfeng's body, but none of them could be done in a short time. The first one was that if Emmy could improve itself and its instinctive power to a higher level, then it could give Hu Yunfeng some spirit sprout to completely eliminate the abnormality in his body. However, Emmy's upgrade had always been a big problem, and it could not be achieved without great opportunities. It was beyond Yin Yang's control, so it was a classic example of an unattainable goal. Secondly, if Yin Yang could make another breakthrough in his endless divine art, he was confident that he could eliminate the negative situation completely. Although Yin Yang had reached the peak of the 5th stage of the endless divine art for a long time, he still needed a lot of karma qi to advance. It was not something that could be gathered in a short time. As for the third one, it was one of Yin Yang's manifestation powers that he had not used for a long time, the metal elemental art. That was the cultivation method that belonged to Yin Yang's second brother, the 9 Supreme's Golden Supreme Gujio. After Yun Yang had gathered all the manifestations of the 9 Supreme's divine arts, he should have been an expert in the art of metal. However, he was adept at manipulating wind, cloud, water, fire, thunder, blood, and earth. Only wood and metal were the 2 elements that he was the most inexperienced in, and he would stop after just a little taste. Because of Emmy, all plants in the world could be controlled by the former, so Yin Yang did not need to worry about it at all. As for the latter, Yin Yang had better methods to refine rare metals and fight enemies, so these 2 powers were rarely used. Therefore, Yin Yang's understanding of the metal elemental art was only at the level of unparalleled sharpness and impregnable defense, which was also the most commonly used method to fight enemies when Golden Supreme Gujio was charging and breaking through enemy lines in the past. Emmy pointed out directly, if Yun Yang had the same level of attainment in the metal elemental art as wind and cloud divine art, he could definitely eliminate the Golden Condor King's metal elemental chi easily, and even integrate it for his own use. However, with Yun Yang's current attainment and knowledge in the metal elemental art, the gap was almost incalculable, and he could not do anything about it. He knew that there were many ways to cure the Golden Condor King, but they were all within reach. How could Yun Yang be in a good mood? Right. The temple master asked me to tell you that he will meet you in the afternoon. Hua Yunfeng looked at Yun Yang and said with a smile, I didn't mention the underground river. His words were somewhat meaningful, but Yun Yang understood the meaning immediately. However, what kind of person was Yun Yang? Naturally, he understood the deeper meaning behind it. Thank you, big brother Hua. Escorted by the stewards, they arrived at Hua Yunfeng's house. It was a large house that occupied an area of 30 to 40 acres. But the furnishings inside were extremely simple, and even a little shabby. At least, it did not match Hua Yunfeng's identity as a Supreme Saint expert. This situation also made everyone present furious. Hua Yunfeng, you miser. UF** King won so much money from me. But where did you spend it? That's right, UF** King cheat us of our money every day. Look at how poor your house is. Where's the money? Hua Yunfeng, where's my money? Where's the money? Hua Yunfeng snorted with a cold face, completely ignoring the clamoring of the people in front of him. Yun Yang, on the other hand, could not help but be dumbfounded for a long time. Although he knew a little about Hua Yunfeng's money-grubbing nature, among the 20 or so stewards who came here, none of them had ever cheated money from Hua Yunfeng. This seemed a little extreme. Think carefully, all of you. From now on, this old man will be in charge of internal affairs. Hua Yunfeng rolled his eyes and said, a considerable part of your household expenses will come from this old man's hands. Such blatant hints caused everyone to be dumbfounded. If you know what's good for you, hurry up and give me gifts to please me. Steward Hua began to ask for bribes. Especially those who owe me money, hurry up and send me the final sum. If you dare to delay, don't count on your family's expenses for thousands of years. Weigh the pros and cons. He cast a sidelong glance at Pu Deshuang and the others, full of provocation and provocation. Pu Deshuang jumped up, clenched his teeth, grabbed his neck, and shook him hard. You don't have any mystical chi or cultivation base, yet you still dare to threaten us? Be careful, I'll beat you 18 times a day. Have you forgotten that the mystical yellow iron says that the bigger the fist, the bigger the reason? Hee, I don't have any cultivation base now, so of course I have to focus on making money. You beat me 18 times a day. Kill me directly if you can. Not to mention 18 times. Even if you beat me 18,000 times, you can't owe me a single cent less. Hua Yunfeng's eyes rolled back as he was strangled, but he still could not be subdued by force, and could not be corrupted by cultivation base. Yin Yang's eyes were filled with admiration as he watched the group of servants fooling around. There was even envy in his eyes. This group of deacons had been together for thousands of years, and they were already as close as brothers. Perhaps each of them had some small flaws, such as greed, lust, or something else. But no matter what their flaws were, they had all been tolerated after being together for thousands of years. Although they quarreled and quarreled every day, the brotherhood between them had long been as strong as gold and stone, and could not be shaken. At the thought of this, Yun Yang could not help but think of his brothers, whose whereabouts were unknown now. Wasn't the relationship between the 9 Supremes like this? It was a pity that the time the 9 Supremes spent together was too little too little. Everyone was winking at Yun Yang when he was going to see the temple master in the afternoon. Our temple master likes young talents the most. Sect leader Yun, you only need to show your true colors, which are neither servile nor overbearing. Don't flatter him deliberately. Our temple master is a donkey. The more you flatter him, the angrier he will be. Yes. Just act as you usually do. Don't be too concerned about being pretentious. Our temple master is actually a little silly. Everyone gave Yun Yang face-to-face advice. Their harsh words were far beyond Yun Yang's expectation, and he did not know whether to laugh or cry. Is it really okay for you to talk about your temple master behind his back like this? Is it really okay? In the afternoon, led by Pu Des Wang, Yun-yang entered the core hall of the Sacred Heart Palace, the Heavenly Heart Palace. There were only 2 guards at the entrance of the hall. When he entered, there was only a room the size of an ordinary house inside, and there were already 5 people seated inside. As Yun-yang entered, the 5 of them looked up at the same time. Sitting at the head of the table was a burly bearded man with round eyes and a leopard's head. Although he was sitting, Yun-yang estimated that he should be at least 9 feet tall if he stood up. If it was just his physical body weight, it would probably be no less than 300 caddies. What a burly man, his physique was extremely strong. A thick black robe was draped over his body, but the front was unbuttoned, revealing a thick patch of chest hair. Seeing Yun-yang enter, he actually laughed with his long legs stretched out and waved his hand, saying, "You must be the leader of the residents of 9 Supremes, Yun-yang? I am Zhan Wufei. Come. Don't be shy, don't stand on ceremony. For a moment, Yun-yang felt like his brain had short-circuited. To be honest, before this, Yun-yang had fantasized countless times about how the Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace, the legendary saint-level expert, Zhan Wufei, would look like. However, no matter how much he thought about it, looking at all his imaginations and fantasies, he had never thought that Zhan Wufei would actually look like this. If this fellow were to walk out, Yun-yang would only think that he was a bandit if others did not mention his identity. He was filled with the aura of a bandit from head to toe, and he did not hide it at all. The demeanor of an expert, the temperament of a senior, the dignity of a pinnacle expert, none of it was there. Not even a drop of it was there. The 4 people on both sides of the leader were also friendly, very refined and elegant. At least, in Yun-yang's understanding, this was what a lord of the Sacred Heart Palace should look like. However, only this lord of the Sacred Heart Palace did not match the demeanor that a lord of the Sacred Heart Palace should have in Yun-yang's mind. Yun-yang wanted to say something, but he could not think of the right words at that moment. He choked and was speechless for a long time. He had wanted to compliment the Lord with a few polite words like, "I've long heard of the Lord's great name. And now that I've seen you today, you're indeed an immortal, and you live up to your reputation." However, he could not bring himself to say such words now. If he were to say such words to this fellow, Yun-yang's guilty conscience was secondary. He was even more afraid that the other party would think that he was mocking him. "This is the Assistant Lord Chen Ruoshui. This is the Assistant Lord Meng Changfei. This is the Assistant Lord Tian Wuming. And this is the Great Elder Lei Qianli." Zhan Wufei introduced them casually. "You're all not outsiders, sit. He glared at him. "Why aren't you sitting?" Yun-yang smiled bitterly and plopped himself down on the chair, a strange feeling surging within him, lasting for a long time. Really, his worldview was ruined. "May I ask who your master is, sect leader Yin? Is it convenient for you to reveal it?" Zhan Wufei smiled. It would have been better if he had not smiled, for there was a tinge of ferocity to it. As he smiled, the curly beard on his face trembled, like a lion grinning. His words were straight to the point. The Sacred Heart Palace and most of the sects with celestial luck banners would be very interested in Yun-yang's background. This would affect their attitude towards Yun-yang and the residents of 9 Supremes in the future. "There's nothing that I can't say about my master. But forgive me for being blunt. I don't even know what my master's name is or what his title is." Yun-yang smiled bitterly. "The old man has never mentioned it. Looks like he's also an eccentric old thing." Zhan Wufei was not bothered at all and said, "Old things nowadays are all eccentric, and they do things in secret. They're not at all straightforward. They're not as straightforward as they used to be when they roamed the martial world, holding their breath." The other 4 looked up into the sky, looking left and right. Regarding the Lord's daily mockery, they treated it as a gust of wind blowing past their ears. There was no point in pursuing it, and it would only make them more annoyed. "Sect leader Yin, what do you think?" Zhan Wufei would not let Yun-yang off the hook, asking with a glare. "What do I think?" Yun-yang was stunned. It did not seem like it was his place to express his opinion. After some thought, he said, "Actually, I think that this situation is very, very, very normal. The old seniors have roamed the martial world for thousands of years. They've seen all kinds of storms and seen all kinds of worldly affairs. They're already used to the mundane world. How can they not be tired of it? Now that they want to conceal their strength and bide their time, they want to live a few days of peace. While they're in seclusion, when they see someone or something that's tempting enough, they'll be overjoyed. It's only human nature to be eccentric when you think about it." He thought about it and said, "At least it's not a good thing right now, but it's not necessarily a bad thing either. Let's see how many people can end their lives of seclusion and step forward when there's a big mess in the future. That's the key. I wonder if Senior thinks so." Jean Wufei slapped his thigh and said, "F***ck. You're absolutely right. You've hit the nail on the head. It's a personal choice for those old fellows to live in seclusion. It's understandable during times of peace, and has nothing to do with the grand scheme of things. However, we humans and the demon race will have a war sooner or later. Unfortunately, we humans can't enter the core of the demon race's territory, but those bastards from the demon race can enter our territory and stir up trouble. There's been more and more friction in recent years, but those old fellows are nowhere to be seen. Once the war breaks out, it'll be terrible if those old bastards get used to living in peace and don't come out." Yin Yang laughed and said, "I'm not as pessimistic as you, Palace Lord. I think when the war between the two races comes, those who step forward will definitely be much more than those who live in seclusion." "Palace Lord, you're thinking too much. The human heart is something that everyone has." Zhang Wufei laughed and said, "Yin Yang, you're a good thing, and your heart is even better. I quite like your temper." Yin Yang lowered his head, exasperated. "I'm a good thing? May I ask what kind of good thing am I? Do you know what my heart is like? I don't even know myself, all right? There's still someone who talks like this. He must be drunk. How did such a person become the Palace Lord of the Sacred Heart Palace?" Chapter 1164. I mean, you have a good heart, you're a good man. Good young man. Haha. Zhang Wufei had obviously realized his slip of the tongue, and was actually laughing at his own slip of the tongue. He laughed and said, "I must thank you for saving the people of the Sacred Heart Palace. They said that I have to reward you with something to show that we, the Sacred Heart Palace, know how to be grateful and repay kindness with kindness. Tell me, what should I reward you with?" The 3 deputy hall masters and a grand elder covered their faces. It was already good enough that a young man dared to sit down in front of you and speak freely, but you actually wanted him to tell you what to reward him. Who would have the nerve to say it? If they did not know their lord well, the 3 deputy leaders would definitely think that their lord was stingy and was trying to bluff his way out of the situation. However, they had thought too much. Perhaps others were too embarrassed to say it. But Yin Yang had the nerve to say it and ask for it. "You've said that I'm a good man. Why am I too embarrassed to say it?" Yin Yang had more or less guessed the Palace Lord's temper the moment they met. He only mused for a moment before speaking. "Palace Lord, you're a straightforward man, so I'll cut to the chase. Regarding rewards and whatnot, I think, from my point of view, it's naturally about what's best, the more the merrier. Of course, it's up to the Palace Lord to decide. The Palace Lord's vast knowledge isn't something a junior like me can compare to. Cough, am I right?" Zhang Wufei was stunned when he heard this. This fellow is really rude, even using words to mock me. Is he a good man? What kind of good man is he? The 3 deputy leaders and a great elder looked up as well, looking at Yin Yang as if they were looking at a deity. How strange. This fellow is really bold. It's been a long time since I've seen a young man like this. The Lord looks straightforward, and his actions cough. He's also straightforward. However, he has dealt with many people in the past in such a manner, saving him a lot of follow-up. "Tell me, what do you want? I'll give you whatever you want." Usually most people would reply, "It's only a small effort, I don't want anything." Therefore, a certain someone went with the flow, and really didn't give anything. But now, a weirdo had appeared in front of him. You told him to ask for it himself, and he gave it to you just because he wanted it. In the end, the first thing he said was the best, and the more the better. This time, he had been tricked by himself. Zhang Wufei grinned and said, Good, good, I like this straightforward temper. How about this? I will give you 3 types of rewards. You can choose one of them. If you choose it, you can just take it away. Ha ha ha. The second trick of the temple master had arrived. Yin Yang was all smiles as he said, May I ask which 3? Does the hall master have any recommendations? Zhang Wufei said straightforwardly, Yes, I do. Personally, I recommend you to choose the first option. 200 Supreme Grade Spirit Jades. Do you know what Supreme Grade Spirit Jades are? That's a top-notch divine item for cultivation. It's a peerless treasure that can never be found in the outside world. It's rare even in the Sacred Heart Palace. I liked you the moment I saw you. I made the decision to give you 200 pieces of top-grade spiritual jades. Supreme Grade Spiritual Jades were high-end controlled items in the Sacred Heart Palace. They really did not exist in the outside world. Because of this, they had artificially created a situation where there was a demand for them, but no supply. They could be said to be priceless treasures, and 200 pieces at that. Not only were they generous, but they were also very sincere. However, from Yin Yang's point of view, it seemed that the Sacred Heart Palace had done this on purpose. They had deliberately strictly controlled the supreme grade spiritual jades, causing the prices to be inflated. Although the reason was unclear, the truth was very clear. The true value and effect of the supreme grade spiritual jades were actually inferior to the ethereal amethyst, which meant that they were more precious than the ethereal amethyst in the outside world. On the way back, Yun Yang had heard Hui Yinfeng mention that he had gambled thousands of supreme grade spiritual jades. Therefore, at least from Yin Yang's point of view, the value of the supreme grade spiritual jades was just that. The so-called peerless and top-notch rarity was all hyped up by the Sacred Heart Palace. How could I, Yin Yang, be fooled by this? Yun Yang's expression did not change as he said, On the way back, Senior Hui Yinfeng gave me some supreme grade spiritual jades. Such rare items are enough for me to use for a long time with my meager strength. Now that we are at the front line of the final war between the human race and the demon race, I'd better keep such top-notch strategic resources as backup. I won't be greedy. Please tell me the second option, Temple Lord. Hui Yinfeng had gained a lot from the bet in the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner, so he was very generous to Yun Yang, his savior. He directly gave him 500 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades, further lowering Yin Yang's demand for them. How could the 200 pieces that Zhang Wufei gave him move Yin Yang's heart? Zhang Wufei glanced at Yin Yang in surprise and said in a deep voice, The second option is an inherited cultivation method of the Sacred Heart Palace, called the Great Divine Skill. Practicing this cultivation method is not only pure, but also one of the few elite cultivation methods, known in the Bound of Universe, that can lead straight to the saint level. The second option was so generous that it was definitely much more than the 200 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jades offered by the first option. The saint level was the peak of the Bound of Universe's cultivators, so it was not difficult to imagine how rare cultivation methods that could lead straight to the saint level were in this world. Yet, Zhang Wufei had given Yin Yang a peerless cultivation method, which was truly generous. Yin Yang coughed and said, I feel that cultivating this cultivation method is going smoothly, and my progress is not yet complete, so I don't want to change my path for the time being. May I ask what the third option is? That person's honey was his poison. The endless divine art that Yin Yang cultivated, and the various manifestation cultivation methods, were all capable of reaching the starry sky, regardless of their realms. How could a mere cultivation method that could reach the level of a saint enter Yin Yang's eyes? Zhang Wufei said, The third option is a spiritual herb, a amethyst peony. This spiritual herb is an exotic spiritual root, so its effects are extremely strong. Yin Yang looked slightly disappointed as he nodded and said, Oh, I'll take this amethyst peony then. Zhang Wufei had not had time to introduce the specific effects of the amethyst peony, but Yin Yang had already chosen it. He could not help but be dumbfounded. Cough, cough, cough. The 3 deputy lords and a great elder lowered their heads abruptly, almost spitting out uncontrollably. The Lord's expression was just too strange. Zhang Wufei laughed amiably and said, "Leader Yin, are you not going to reconsider? If you're not satisfied, we can still discuss it further." "Not at all, not at all. I'm very satisfied with the third option," Yin Yang said confidently. "I've always liked spiritual roots and spiritual herbs. I'm very interested in any kind of spiritual herb, although this is the first time I've heard of this amethyst peony, and I've never seen it before. To me, the joy of watching a spiritual herb grow is already wonderful." The corners of Zhang Wufei's lips twitched subconsciously, deeply feeling that this fellow was really different from the others. Perhaps he was too different. He actually felt that he could not tell if this fellow was really honest or just pretentious. He looked like he had no choice but to pick, but he had chosen the most valuable option out of the three. The amethyst peony. Not many people had heard of the amethyst peony, but it did not mean that it was mediocre. It had another name that was well known to all: the soul-refining flower. The soul-refining flower was an exquisite spiritual herb of the bound of universe. Only top-notch cultivators could use it, because it only had one effect. The soul would be eternally solidified after consumption. This effect was too high-end for low-level cultivators, far beyond their reach. Even if they knew about it, it was basically useless. However, for high-level cultivators, it was like having a second life. The so-called eternally solidified soul meant that even if the physical body of the user was destroyed, the soul could still live eternally in this world, and not fall into the cycle of reincarnation. What's more, even if the soul was burned by a saint's fire of tempering, it would not cause too much damage to the soul. Even if the soul was shattered into pieces and scattered across the world, the soul could still gather again with the passage of time and slowly take shape. Consuming the soul-refining flower was equivalent to having an immortal body. In such a state, it was even more successful when used for possession and rebirth. Not only would there not be a situation where the soul could not fuse, but it could also wash away the original soul in the body of the possessor, preserving all the soul energy in the possessor's body. From then on, there would be no obstacles, and it would be smooth sailing on the path of cultivation. In the entire bound of universe, there was only one spiritual herb that could solidify the soul. Legend had it that there was no such spiritual herb in this world. Instead, it was an almighty being who felt that his best friend had fallen and could not be resurrected. After ascending to the top, he preached to the starry sky and created this spiritual herb out of thin air. He scattered it in the bound of universe, so that if his descendants obtained it, they would not have to experience the same tragedy that Zhang Wufei had gone through. The Sacred Heart Palace only had two such dream divine grade plants. As the palace lord, Zhang Wufei had always treated it like a treasure. Someone did not want the treasure to be covered in dust, so he would take it out from time to time to show off. Therefore, every time something like this happened, he would always take it out and display it under a different name. Those who received the reward would all choose one of the other rewards without exception. They would never pick a spiritual herb that they did not know what it was used for, and whose name was not even known, and miss out on the opportunity just like that. Of course, they would not know that Zhang Wufei would be secretly pleased for a long time because of this. To put it simply, this was Zhang Wufei's bad taste. He had placed the most precious thing in front of him, which was equivalent to giving him a great opportunity. Who else could he blame if he missed it? This feeling of satisfaction had always been there. Basically, Zhang Wufei could be happy for a long time after the event every time. It had almost become a habit, however. It had never crossed his mind that he would encounter a weirdo like Yin Yang when he took it out this time. He had unwillingly taken away the Sacred Heart Palace's most precious spiritual plant. The Sacred Heart Palace only had 2 stalks of this spiritual plant. From Zhang Wufei's point of view, Yin Yang would never give up on the art of magnificence that could lead straight to the saint level. Therefore, Zhang Wufei's plan was to pretend to be generous when Yin Yang was choosing the cultivation method. "I'll give you all these spiritual jades as well." It was a display of the palace lord of the Sacred Heart Palace's grandeur. Art of magnificence was a cultivation method that could lead straight to the saint level. With Yin Yang's luck of becoming the leader of a middle-class celestial luck banner sect, how could he not want such a cultivation method? In the end, in reality, Yin Yang extended his hand and took away the amethyst peony that was not a gift, but a tool used to show off. To Zhang Wufei, this was like a bolt from the blue. He was stunned. This was an unacceptable reality. This amethyst peony. Zhang Wufei was tongue-tied, not knowing what to say. He looked at the 3 deputy palace lords and great elder pleadingly. The 4 of them stared at him with perplexed eyes, then lowered their heads and shook their shoulders desperately. Oh no, I can't take it anymore. Perhaps the 4 of them had been waiting for this scene for a long time. Or perhaps they just wanted to see a certain hall master make a fool of himself. In any case, not a single one of them spoke for a long time. Yin Yang said gratefully, "Palace Lord, you are so generous. The Sacred Heart Palace is indeed the top force in the bound of universe. To actually use such a spiritual herb as a reward. I know that this amethyst peony is another name for the famous fantasy spiritual herb, the soul refining flower." Chapter 1165. Yin Yang coughed and said no more. Leader Yin, the war between the demon race and the human race is about to begin. Zhang Wufei calmed himself down and said slowly, "When the time comes, the Sacred Heart Palace will be the first to bear the brunt. Leader Yin Yang, you must seize the time to cultivate. Don't let me down." Yin Yang agreed, but his mind was racing, trying to guess the meaning behind Zhang Wufei's words. Zhang Wufei chuckled and handed over a ring, saying, "Since you've already made your choice, there's an amethyst peony in here. Also 200 pieces of supreme-grade spiritual jade, they're all yours. Once the war starts, it'll be inevitable that lives will be lost. The demon race has been dormant for a long time. Once they invade, they'll come in full force. I'm not sure if we can defend ourselves." Zhang Wufei's rough face revealed an indescribable sense of heroism as he said faintly, "When the time comes, I'm afraid all the high-end martial artists will have to rush to the war immediately, in a very short time. The sects with celestial luck banners." Zhang Wufei looked at Yin Yang and said word by word, "This supreme-grade spiritual jade has always been a unique cultivation aid treasure of the Sacred Heart Palace. You must make good use of it. Use it piece by piece, and strive to improve your cultivation base." He had suddenly changed his tone and the topic, and it was obvious that he had only said half of what he wanted to say. There seemed to be a deeper meaning behind it. Yin Yang frowned in thought and said, "Lord Palace Lord, if the Golden Condor King crossed the border this time, will there be a similar situation?" Zhang Wufei's gaze was filled with admiration. Attacks like the Golden Condor Kings have happened frequently in recent years, and it's usually after the Celestial Luck Banner contest. In the beginning, it only happened once every few hundred years. But in recent centuries, it's been happening frequently. The demon kings who crossed the border previously mainly targeted upper-class sects, or directly attacked the Sacred Heart Palace. But recently, they've been targeting middle-class celestial luck banners and lower-class sections. They've probably changed their strategy, and are trying to take drastic measures. I have to say that this strategy is right. The damage to our side is greater than any previous time, and we've suffered heavy losses. But it's no big deal. How can there be a rainbow if there's no wind and rain? Survival of the fittest is an unchanging principle. Zhang Wufei laughed. The Sacred Heart Palace has been enjoying themselves for too long. He stood up and said, "Sect Leader Yin, I believe we'll meet again in the future." Zhang Wufei laughed and said, "Sect Leader." And he sect leader, and left. The first elder, who had been silent all this while, only let out a light laugh. He stood up shakily and left, leaving only Deputy Palace Master Chun Ruoshui behind. Chun Ruoshui looked at Yin Yang for a long time before she finally nodded and said, "Leader Yin, please remember Lord Palace Lord's words." Yin was Yang, though even though he was he was he. He went over Zhang Wufei's words word by word in his mind, but still could not find anything worth remembering. That Chun Ruoshui's words were just shooting at him. How could he not be confused? Zhang Wufei's words replayed in his mind, but he didn't find anything worth remembering. Chun Ruoshui's words were pointless. How could he not be confused? Chun Ruoshui did not bother to explain. She laughed and turned around to leave. In the next moment, Yun Yang realized that he was already in the garden outside the hall. Then the scenery in front of him changed. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of Hui Yunfeng's courtyard. Yun Yang stared at the spiritual qi mist before him. The bewilderment in his eyes deepened, almost suspecting that what had just happened was just a dream. However, the spatial ring that he had obtained was proof that everything that had happened just now was real. There was no way it could be faked. What does it mean? That night, Hui Yunfeng held a banquet. More than 300 people came to drink, and the atmosphere was very lively. Yun Yang reminded Hui Yunfeng's relatives again. Don't let him use any mystical qi. Don't let him use any of it. The whole family took note of it. Yun Yang watched as Hui Yunfeng drank, and called his children and grandchildren over. They lined up neatly, including his grandchildren, great-grandchildren, 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 and the youngest son. There were more than 700 children and grandchildren in this large group, and this did not include those who were underage. It seemed that many of them were white-haired and senile. Just by looking at their faces, many of them looked more like the great ancestor than Hui Yunfeng. Hui Yunfeng ordered, "Kneel down and kowtow to your Uncle Yin." Ancestor Yin. Yun Yang was startled. What? Ancestor Yin? How could he be so senior? Where did this theory come from? Hearing the great ancestor's order, Yun Yang hurriedly stopped the group of old men who were about to kneel. Don't. It's not appropriate. Sweat trickled down Yun Yang's forehead. Old Hua, you're the great ancestor of your descendants, so it's reasonable and legal for you to be worshipped by them. But I can't. I'm only a few years old. If I were to be worshipped by such a group of people, I wouldn't be able to accept it. Brother, this is what I should do, Hui Yunfeng said seriously. Hui Yunfeng said seriously, you saved my life. What's wrong with them bowing to the great benefactor of our clan's patriarch? What do you want to do if you refuse? Do you want me, an old man, to kowtow to you and thank you for saving my life? Ding Byuk and Yu Bunning also came to persuade him, but no matter how they tried, Yun Yang refused. What a joke! If I really let these old men call me uncle, grandpa, and ancestor Yin. Yun Yang felt his scalp tingle, his limbs stiffen, and his heart freeze at the thought of it. It's really not good. After staying for 2 days, Yun Yang finally said goodbye and left under the warm send-off of the entire Hu family. On the other side, Hui Yunfeng had begun to chase them for their debts. Pu Des Huang and the others were chased by him, their faces full of resentment. Yun Yang walked out of the Sacred Heart Palace to a remote path that was completely devoid of people. After repeatedly confirming that there was no one around, he suddenly turned into a gust of wind and drifted away leisurely. For the first time, his long-lost manifestation powers appeared in the bound of universe. Not long after Yun Yang's figure disappeared, a person abruptly appeared in the place where he disappeared, her face full of confusion. It was Chun Ruoshui, the deputy temple leader of the Sacred Heart Palace. Where did this boy go? Why did he suddenly disappear? Chun Ruoshui looked puzzled. He disappeared inexplicably. What method did he use to leave? Isn't this secret technique a little too shocking? Chun Ruoshui looked around again and again, checking all the traces, and the doubts in his heart grew. Chun Ruoshui's cultivation base was above Hui Yunfeng's and slightly higher than that of the Golden Condor Kings. With his cultivation base, he naturally would not be discovered by Yun Yang if he secretly followed him. Let alone let a junior with the cultivation base of a Saint King slip away without a trace. But now the fact was contrary to common sense. No matter what method Yun Yang had used to disappear without a trace, his ability was amazing and worthy of pride. Chun Ruoshui checked again and again, but he still had no clue. With a shake of his body he disappeared. Did Yun Yang use the wind cloud manifestation because he sensed Chun Ruoshui's tracking? Of course not. Just like Chun Ruoshui's judgment, Yun Yang really did not have that ability at the moment. Everything was just a coincidence, a stroke of luck. Yun Yang had always been cautious. After leaving the Sacred Heart Palace's perimeter, he had used the wind cloud manifestation to ensure his own safety. Who knew if the Demon Clan's attack had come to an end? Through his communication with Zhang Wufei, It seemed that he, a newly advanced intermediate class, was also within the target range of the demon clan's experts. Secondly, he wanted to quickly hand over his gains this time to Emmy as soon as possible. Using the wind cloud manifestation was the safest handover method at the moment. Amidst the layers of clouds, Yun-Yang focused his attention on the newly obtained spatial ring, confirming the amethyst peony herb within. It was better to just call it the psyche refining flower. The amethyst peony herb was really not that famous. After confirming that there was no mistake, he sent it into his deific consciousness space. Emmy squeaked happily when it saw it. The soul refining flower was extremely effective against the deific consciousness, and the soul. It was the heaven and earth treasure that Emmy lacked the most. With the soul refining flower's arrival, it could make up for this weakness to the greatest extent. Emmy planted the soul refining flower impatiently, paying attention to the large amount of chi of vitality without hesitation. The soul refining flower that had been greatly nourished recovered its vigor instantly, returning to its most flourishing state. Seeing that it could do something, Emmy used the sharp tip of its vine to gently scratch the soul refining flower. Slowly, the soul refining flower trembled slightly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. In the end, Emmy actually split into 3 seedlings. Each seedling was only the size of a bean, but it was entirely purple, without a hint of other colors. The soul refining flower, that was universally acknowledged to be untransplantable, had actually been successfully grown by Emmy into 3 seedlings. Yun-Yang almost fainted from the joy. This surprise could not have been any bigger. With these 3 soul refining flowers, it was no different from reversing the fates of 3 experts that were destined to die. It was truly a rare treasure that could not be bought with money. Then, Yun-Yang looked at the supreme-grade spiritual jade. I'd like to see what's so special about this supreme-grade spiritual jade. To think that it's been exaggerated to such an extent that it's even stronger than my ethereal amethysts. This time, Yun-Yang had obtained 2 large sums of supreme-grade spiritual jade from Hui Yinfeng and Zhan Wufei. However, he had been free every day, and it was only now that he had the time to take a closer look at the legendary mystical items. Yun-Yang observed and sensed it carefully. As expected, his eyes lit up and he felt refreshed. His vision was filled with a dense purple chi, which was truly mystical. However, among the 200 supreme-grade spiritual jade he had obtained from the Sacred Heart Palace, there was one that was slightly different. It was glowing with a lustrous white light. It was exceptionally eye-catching amidst the purple chi's brilliance. What is this? Yun-Yang grabbed it and saw that it was a strange communication jade slip. The reason why it was strange was probably because the quality of this communication jade slip was many times stronger than ordinary ones. Although the design was disguised, Yun-Yang could still tell at a glance that this was a communication jade slip made of supreme-grade spiritual jade. There's indeed another secret. It's not so easy to accept the extra supreme-grade spiritual jade. Yun-Yang instinctively touched the jade slip with his divine sense, but he stopped immediately. He frowned and pondered for a moment. Then, he simply followed the wind and clouds, and went straight into the residence of 9 Supremes. After his trip to the Sacred Heart Palace, Yun-Yang felt unsafe everywhere. He had to go to an absolutely safe place to deal with it. In the Sacred Heart Palace, Zhan Wufei, who was sitting with his legs crossed, suddenly opened his eyes with a cry of surprise. He had clearly felt that his divine sense had been touched, but then, there was nothing else. Looking at the time, this kid should have gone out by now. He clearly touched the divine sense seal just now. Why is there no further movement? No, he should have opened my communication jade slip. But why didn't I sense anything at all? Unless he's in a place that's completely cut off from the rest of the world. But in this world, is there any place that can cut off the connection of my divine sense? This kid is full of mystery indeed. His providence far surpasses his peers. If I leave this to him, perhaps he can really succeed. Zhan Wufei's mind was filled with thoughts, but he closed his eyes again, a look of contemplation on his bearded face. As long as this kid is a little smarter, he can go anywhere in the world. It was only when Yun-Yang arrived at the residence of 9 Supremes that he really opened the communication jade slip. Just as he opened it, a soft sound was heard, and a screen of light suddenly appeared before him. Inside the screen was a landscape of mountains and rivers. In the sky, countless demonic beasts were flying, blocking out the sun. There were eagles, cranes, and there seemed to be chickens as well. Below, there were human warriors and some huge demonic beasts in human form, but they were not in a complete state. Both sides were engaged in an intense battle. Zhang Wufei's voice rang out. This was the scene 7,000 years ago, when the demon race invaded. At that time, the three upper-class sects lost half of their forces. This battle only lasted for 10 days. When the humans reacted and wanted to launch a massive counterattack, the demon race had already retreated. Their official statement at that time was the demon race crown prince was lost. In that battle, hundreds of human experts died and dozens of people went missing, their whereabouts unknown. Everyone didn't think much of it then, thinking that the demon race had gone crazy once. What followed was another scene. Again, flying demonic beasts came, and the two races fought. 6,000 years ago, another war broke out. This time, hundreds of people died, and dozens of people went missing. 5,000 years ago, hundreds of people died and dozens of people went missing. 1,200 years ago, there was another ambush. Some people from the middle-class celestial luck banner sects died, and some went missing. 700 years ago, 15 people went missing. 300 years ago, people from the middle-class and lower-class sects went missing. 90 years ago, the middle-class and lower-class sects went missing. Recently, 6 middle-class sects were attacked one after another and 3 lower-class sects were annihilated. On the surface, only the Golden Condor King's tribe came, but many of the people who went missing were not killed by the Golden Condor King's tribe. However, there were also 44 people who went missing. Among them, 21 of the middle-class sects were seated disciples, and 23 of the lower-class sects were missing. I suspect that the demon race's frequent invasions are not simply to create killing and chaos. Instead, they are more inclined to rob the human cultivators and bring them back. However, what exactly they want to do is thought-provoking and difficult to come to a conclusion. All these years, the Sacred Heart Palace is not completely inactive. However, no matter what the Sacred Heart Palace plans, the demon race knows about it in advance. No matter what arrangements they make, no matter how many ambushes they lay, the demon race will respond appropriately and suffer fewer losses. There's no doubt that there's something fishy going on in the Sacred Heart Palace. Regarding this matter, I've sent a few people to infiltrate the demon race to find out, but all the infiltrators died a violent death. Moreover, they were all found just after they went over. They didn't even have time to do anything. Even the secret arrangements that I've made in my own secret chamber will be found out by the other party. This traitor is a great misfortune for the human race. I've thought about it over and over again, but I can't come up with any countermeasures. I'm powerless. However, this matter concerns the future of the human race. We can't ignore it. We must catch the traitor in the Sacred Heart Palace as soon as possible before we can talk about the future. Sect Leader Yin, if you're interested in this matter and want to help, there's a complete set of the demon race's cultivation technique in this jade slip. Whether it's demonic power, divine consciousness, or even identity and background, it includes everything. If you're not interested, it doesn't matter. A gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. I understand. If you want to go, consume the soul refining flower first. It guarantees that your spirit won't be destroyed under any circumstances. Zhang Wufei's words stopped abruptly. However, the image continued. What followed was a detailed roadmap, as well as a detailed introduction of the demon race. Genius 1 Second Remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 1166. Cough. This was not a happy reason. He would make up for it tomorrow. It was too late to write. I am the Supreme Being. He would make up for it tomorrow based on the situation. It was currently being typed. Please wait a moment. After the content was updated, please refresh the page to receive the latest updates. Chapter 1167. After reading it, Yin Yang fell silent for a long time. After a long time, he finally stood up and put away the jade slip. His expression was calm as he drifted out of the residence of 9 Supremes and hurried to the place he had built. Along the way, Yin Yang's mind was in turmoil. It was rare for him to be calm. Naturally, he was thinking about the jade slip Zhang Wufei had given him and its contents. Obviously, this was a private mission that Zhang Wufei had assigned to him. Moreover, it was a top-secret mission that only Zhang Wufei, the Lord of Sacred Heart Palace, knew about. It seemed that the initiative was in his hands now, and he could accept it if he wanted to or not if he did not want to. But, was this really the case? Since Zhang Wufei had given him this, it meant that it was impossible for him not to accept it. He had even given him all the things that could prevent accidents, and even included the most detailed introduction, the meticulous route, the perfect identity and background, and even the righteousness of the entire human race. Under such a premise, if he still refused, he would be ignorant of morality, disregarding human relations, and being heartless and unjust. In short, there would be nothing good about it. He would be seeking death, and there would be no benefit in this world. This Sacred Heart Palace Lord, is this how he thanks people? Yin Yang was extremely depressed about the current situation. Isn't this a trap? He looks extremely straightforward, like a bandit, a hot-headed character without any schemes. But this hidden scheme is King deep as the ocean. Perhaps the matter was not so complicated. Although it was dangerous, the benefits, or rather the price, paid by the other party was also great. The soul refining flower was a dream item that could ensure the eternal stability of the soul of the person who consumed it. Other than the 2 stalks in Zhang Wufei's hands, there might not be another one in this world. Even if there were, it would be even more difficult to obtain. This soul-refining flower was most likely a backup for this mission. The so-called gift to thank him for saving Hui Yinfeng was, in fact, only the first 2 items, supreme-grade spiritual jade and the godly might skill. Unexpectedly, he had given up the spiritual treasure and the skill and chosen the 3rd item, the amethyst peony. That was how he had managed to achieve this by a fluke. He had made this happen. If that was the case, then wouldn't his scheme against the purple crystal peony herb be a self-destructive act? If that's the case, then it's fine. If the infiltration of the demon clan was a last-minute move by Zhang Wufei, then this person's intelligence and adaptability are too terrifying. Sigh. How is it possible for a simple-minded person to reach the position of Sacred Heart Palace Lord? It should be said that I underestimated the people of the world. Yin Yang sighed. This matter, I still need to think about it carefully. Perhaps there is still a way. However, this matter can't be considered as me committing suicide. Since I'm already here, no matter what I choose, I'm afraid that I won't be able to escape this mission. I'm afraid that when they found out that I was escorting Hui Yinfeng back, they had already arranged for me to do this. Yin Yang heaved a long sigh. The strange battle is without nothing? I don't blame you. Zhang Wufei was also helpless. There was almost no one around him that he could completely trust, so this was the only way. However, as he ran forward in the sky and let his imagination run wild, he suddenly heard the sound of metal clashing from below. A somewhat familiar yet long-lost voice guffawed. Run, run. Ha ha ha. Let's see where you can run to. A voice filled with grief and indignation said, Lei Dongtian, don't go too far. I'm from the Zenith Heaven sect. Your Lei family may be powerful, but our Zenith Heaven sect is not to be trifled with. The arrogant voice guffawed again. Now that things have come to this, so what if you scream louder? I'm going to eat you up today. Scream, scream again, scream louder. Ha ha ha, this is. As Yin Yang's thoughts raced, a sense of joy surged into his heart. Lei Dongtian. He had unexpectedly reunited with this fellow. Speaking of which, it had been a long time since he had seen this fellow. He had been puzzled for a long time back then. How could this fellow be so arrogant that day, claiming that he would return to Tianxian soon to uproot the Four Seasons Tower and turn Mr. Nian into ashes? However, there had been no news of him after he returned to the Bound of Universe. Yin Yang had thought that he would never cross paths with this person again. But he had unexpectedly met him here. Of course, Yin Yang would not miss the chance to reunite with an old friend, especially one who appeared to be a brother and a friend, but was actually an unresolvable grudge. He dove down quietly to see what was going on. Judging from the commotion, this fellow seemed to be robbing someone from the Zenith Heaven sect. This fellow had guts. Guts were secondary, but how could he possibly have such capability? When they had parted that day, this fellow's cultivation base was only slightly higher than the Four Seasons Tower's ice, frost, snow, sword, and the other venerable lords. At most he was at the level of a superior supreme. He was indeed not weak back then. But he was no longer worthy of Yin Yang's attention now. Yin Yang was only hesitating whether he should kill him directly or leave him to Jilingxi. Back then, Jilingxi had hated him to the core. Below, he actually didn't choose to rob by the side of the forest. It's not some secluded place either. What kind of robbery is this? As a former robber, Yin Yang was shocked by what he saw. The place where the incident happened was a busy official road. A robbery had actually happened right in the middle of the road. For the sake of a whole circle of lay family members, a man and a woman were trapped in the core. This was not surprising, but what was surprising was, there was another large group of people watching the show from a distance, forming a third party. Yin Yang felt dizzy at the sight before him. Is this a robbery? Isn't this too blatant? I thought the bound of universes God forbid such a robbery? Lei Dongtian, the only person Yin Yang was familiar with, was standing boldly on a large chair that he had moved out of nowhere. His arms were behind his back as he assumed an elegant posture, his chin raised as he guffawed arrogantly. Zenith Heaven sect, haha. So what if it's Zenith Heaven sect? How dare you snatch something that my beloved woman's younger sister's cousin's husband's brother's concubine has taken a liking to? I'll tell you clearly today, if you don't hand it over to me, today will be your burial ground. No one can save you. The reason was so compelling that it rendered Yin Yang speechless. What was even more peculiar was that Yin Yang felt a sense of familiarity from the scene once again. It was rather familiar. Yin Yang pulled someone beside him and asked, "Brother, what's going on? What's going on here? Why is it so lively here?" Looking at Yin Yang's noble bearing, he seemed to have some background, especially his outstanding looks. Naturally, the man dared not ignore him. He chuckled, his mustache twitching as he said, "Isn't this all because the two Daoyuo sect disciples in the middle didn't handle things properly? They reap what they sow." Yin Yang was stunned by the sudden answer. He had never thought that it would be like this. How angry were the two people from Daoyuo sect? Lei Dongtian had already acted in such a manner, yet he still had to give an unscrupulous evaluation? What's going on? Can you tell me? Recently, this Mr. Lei has fallen in love with another girl. This is something that everyone in this area knows, and it's not a rare occurrence. And the cause of this is, the cousin of this girl's bestie came to visit her. Coincidentally, this girl was with her bestie, so she accompanied her bestie to go shopping. Along with this cousin was her husband. He brought his brother, and his brother brought his concubine. This concubine was born with a chronic disease. Her blood was cold, and she couldn't conceive. Coincidentally, she found someone selling 9-yang grass while she was shopping. It was the medicine that could cure her chronic disease. Naturally, she went to buy it. Yin Yang's head was spinning from the complicated relationship, his mind spinning. What kind of relationship was this? You can guess what happened next. The two Zenith Heaven sect disciples saw the 9-yang grass first, and were discussing the price. They had already reached an agreement, and bought the 9-yang grass first. The brother and concubine of this cousin's husband naturally didn't want to give up, but they refused to sell it no matter what. A conflict broke out between the two sides. The two De Luo sect disciples wanted to leave, but the woman young Master Lei fancied couldn't stand it, and went forward to stop them. In the end, she was scolded. Therefore, young Master Lei flew into a rage, and mobilized the clan's thunder guards to demand an explanation. Together with the 9-yang grass, Yin Yang's mind grew increasingly muddled. You've explained it for a long time. And it's very detailed. But why do I only understand half of it? These two Daluo sect disciples had probably stolen something that someone related to Lei Dongtian wanted, although their relationship was not very close. However, Lei Dongtian had to perform to please his sweetheart, so that he could win her heart. This was a must. He believed that Lei Dongtian could not afford to lose face in front of the girl he liked. As a result, he directly intercepted the two of them here. As long as this matter was done well, he would first get the prize, and then please the family of his sweetheart. Then, it would be a matter of time before he won the heart of his sweetheart. Based on this reason, he made the path of Tao of Calamity as a bystander, as high profile as he wanted to be. Brother, this isn't right. Didn't you say that the two Daluo sect disciples weren't particular? Why did you say that it was the two Daluo sect disciples who bought the item first? According to this, doesn't it mean that young Master Lei's relative wanted to forcefully buy the item from them, but they didn't intend to sell it? You can't say that the Daluo sect disciples are in the wrong, can you? Perhaps they also urgently need that 9-yang grass? Yin Yang was puzzled. He spoke bluntly. Sai, this conflict depends on the other party. This is the Lei family's territory. If they refuse to let go, it means that they're not giving face to the Lei family. They've offended young Master Lei, so of course they've brought all the suffering upon themselves. The man rolled his eyes and said, young Master Lei has already made his stance clear, yet they still insist on not giving, and even brought up the Daluo sect to raise their price. Isn't this an attempt to bully the weak? How is this not being particular? Yin Yang felt lightheaded and said, Big brother, it's obviously young Master Lei who's being unreasonable first. What do you mean first? Being reasonable? Brother, you're new here, aren't you? The man rolled his eyes at Yin Yang and clicked his tongue. How strange. How strange. When has our young Master Lei ever been reasonable? You don't even know this. You're lacking in martial world experience. Yin Yang's eyes widened. At this moment, Yin Yang was struck with a sudden realization as he realized where his sense of familiarity came from. This was the feeling he had when he was in Tianxian continent, watching Dong Tianling and the rest of the 4 great young masters conduct themselves. He had taken it as a fact that they were the ones who bullied the weak and acted in a domineering manner. Lei Dongtian, on the other hand, was obviously at a higher level. This fellow had already taken his unreasonableness a step further, to the point where others did not find it strange at all, and came to the conclusion that young Master Lei was the unreasonable one. He was the idol and legend of the popinjays world. Even if Dong Tianling and the other 3 came together, they would still be in awe of the spectacle and admit their inferiority to him. As he spoke, the man suddenly turned to look at Yin Yang suspiciously. His eyes darted around as he asked tentatively, Who are you? Are you not a relative of the Lei family? Then why are you dressed so nicely here? Yin Yang was dumbfounded. It's my habit to dress nicely. Why must I be a relative of the Lei family? I can't even dress nicely here if I'm not a relative of the Lei family? What kind of rule is this? What kind of rule is this? Just as he was complaining in his heart, he heard the man beside him suddenly call out, Young Master Lei, there's a pretty boy spy here. He's trying to find out about you. This person must be up to no good. With this shout, the surrounding people all retreated in unison. There was only one person left standing in the large empty space. It was so eye-catching that it was impossible not to notice him. The one who remained was, of course, Yin Yang, the eldest young Master Yin, a pretty boy who was dressed nicely. At that moment, the 40 to 50 Lei guards, eldest young Master Lei, his gang of scoundrels, and the 2 Daluo sect disciples all turned to look at him in unison. Suddenly being the center of attention, Yin Yang felt like he had been F***ed. Although he had come down to meet Lei Dongtian, perhaps to settle some matters of the past, being thrown out like this was an embarrassing situation that he had never expected. The person who was talking to him was also a martial artist. Although his cultivation was not high, it was rare for a martial artist to have no moral integrity to such an extent. It was really rare to see a martial artist hugging a thick thigh to such an extent. As Lei Dongtian turned to look, he suddenly cried out in surprise, Brother Yun! Before his voice could echo in the air, he had already dashed over and hugged Yin Yang. almost tearing up in joy. He sobbed, "Brother, I thought I would never see you again in this lifetime. You finally come up. This is wonderful, wonderful." Being hugged by a man, Yun-yang stiffened all over, not knowing how to react for a moment. What was going on? Lei Dongtian's enthusiasm caught him off guard, and he could not defend against it. Not only was Yun-yang's body stiff, even his thoughts were a little stiff. If Lei Dongtian were to use this skill on Yun-yang, he would definitely be hit. Yun-yang did not have a good impression of Lei Dongtian from the beginning, not at all. Back then, in order to cultivate his 7 emotions praxis, this fellow had chased after Jilingxi and the other girls for thousands of miles. He did not pursue them properly, but played them like a cat catching mice. Similarly, he had used Yun-yang as a companion to cultivate the 7 emotions praxis. Of course, Yun-yang had only been using Lei Dongtian from the beginning. The desire to kill him had always been there, and it was still the same until now. All in all, the relationship between the two of them had not reached the point where they would hug upon meeting. Besides, there was still the matter of his 6th brother Supreme Thunder between him and Lei Dongtian's Lei family. There was no way he could avoid it. "Brother! Brother!" Lei Dongtian hugged Yun-yang, his eyes brimming with tears. "I miss you so much. It's not that I don't want to look for you, but I really can't. I've been worried about you all this time. I can't sleep at night. I'm not energetic when I cultivate during the day. I miss you when I eat. I miss you when I drink. I miss you day and night. I can't eat or sleep." Goosebumps rose all over Yun-yang's body as he stared at Lei Dongtian in a daze. All the Lei guards, as well as the crowd of onlookers, were dumbfounded and speechless for a long time without exception. This treacherous pretty boy was actually young Master Lei's brother? It looked like their relationship was not shallow either. If not for the fact that they were all men, they would have thought that they were a couple who had been separated for many years, quietly reuniting on the war-torn streets. Some of the more cunning ones instantly made the connection. As the saying goes, one doesn't know where one's feelings start. Once you look at him, it doesn't matter if he's a human or not. Not to mention that this gigolo's looks are really outstanding. Maybe it's just a possibility. Cough cough. "How have you been, Brother Lei?" Yun-yang finally snapped out of his trance and struggled to push away Lei Dongtian, who was still extremely emotional and unwilling to let go. Rolling his eyes, he said, "We haven't seen each other for only a few days. Why are you so passionate?" Lei Dongtian said emotionally, "Brother, you don't know how much I worry about you every day, how much I miss you, how much I miss you. There's no one else in my heart anymore." On the other side, the 2 Daluo sect disciples felt an indescribable sense of hopelessness when they saw that reinforcements had arrived. It looked like the 9-yang grass was destined to be lost. The young man in purple said, "We brothers have reunited after a long time. It's a great day. Let's not make things unpleasant today. Let these 2 from Daluo sect go." Lei Dongtian guffawed and said generously, "Yes, yes, yes. Today is a great day for us. Since my brother has spoken, let them go." As he spoke, he waved his hand and said, "Both of you are lucky today. My brother and I have reunited after a long time. I'm in a good mood, so I won't snatch the 9-yang grass from you. Leave now." A greasy-haired fellow in colorful clothes said anxiously, "Young Master Lei, the 9-yang grass." Lei Dongtian hollered, "What are you talking about? Shut the hell up. What 9-yang grass? It's a great thing that my brother is here today. Don't be ignorant. Let me tell you, if you dare to spoil my brother's mood, I'll beat you to death." The man's face turned pale. He sniffed and ducked to the side, lowering his head and daring not to speak. Only the newcomers can be heard laughing, but the old ones can be heard crying. Our young lady has not even become a newcomer yet, but she has already become an old one. What are you waiting for? Lei Dongtian turned and scowled. What are you standing there for? What are you waiting for? The man and woman were overjoyed. They bowed deeply and said, "Thank you, young Master Lei. Thank you, young master. May I ask for this young master's name?" "I'm Xiao Yuqing and Hua Xiaorong from Daluo sect. I'll repay you generously for your help today." Yun-yang smiled warmly and said, "I'm Yun-yang. I've met your sect leader, once during the Battle of the Celestial Luck Banner. It's just a small matter today. You don't have to be so courteous. It's better for both of you to leave as soon as possible. Thank you. The two men remembered the name and left after thanking him profusely. Watching them leave, Lei Dongtian laughed and said, "Brother, let's go for a drink." As he spoke, he took Yin Yang's hand, intending to hold it and leave. Yin Yang shuddered and struggled to break free. He smiled bitterly and said, "Brother Lei, I'm not used to your intimacy. It's not good to be seen by others, not good at all." Ha 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 ha. Lei Dongtian laughed arrogantly. "Brother, you're too cautious. Who dares to say a bad word about me, Lei Dongtian, within a radius of 10,000 miles? Don't worry, brother." Before his voice trailed off, he reached out to pull Yin Yang again. Yin Yang dodged quickly, feeling that something was wrong. This fellow, could it be that he had actually gone mad? Why were his words and actions completely different from before? Although he used to be very warm, his attitude was still very perfunctory. Yin Yang could see through the hypocrisy and condescending attitude at a glance. Now, however, that feeling was all gone. There was only sincerity, only familiarity. This was something that couldn't be faked at all. Yin Yang could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. If he were Lei Dongtian, he would be very warm to his cultivation cauldron, but he would not act like this. There must be a problem here, a big problem. Brother Lei, you seem to have changed a lot from before. Yin Yang said tentatively. Lei Dongtian laughed out loud and said, "You must be wondering why my actions are so unrestrained and unrestrained. I'm treating you well, right? Let's have a good chat when the dishes are served. You'll understand once I explain and be happy for me." Yin Yang nodded and said, "All right." Sure enough, there was another reason behind this, but he didn't know what it was. Could it be that this guy's 7 emotions praxis had reached the advanced level? Well, it was very likely that this guy's current cultivation level was much higher than before. "All of you don't have to follow me. I'm going to have a drink with my brother. We have something to talk about in private. Go do what you need to do." Lei Dongtian waved his hand casually. "Second young master this. It's all right, I'm with my brother. Will he harm me? Don't worry. Let's go, brother. I'll bring you to a delicious place. We won't go home until we're drunk." As he spoke, Lei Dongtian had already dragged Yin Yang far away. Only his eyeballs were left on the ground. Was this person who was loyal and generous to his friends really Lei Dongtian's young master Lei? Could it be that the gigolo was really that outstanding? After a while, both of them were already in a small tavern. It was an extremely simple tavern. Although the tavern was small, the surrounding scenery was elegant. There were plum trees in all directions. Although it was already summer, and the plum blossoms had not yet bloomed, the greenery of the trees still made people feel that they were brimming with vitality. Among the trees, there was a thatched shed that was filled with the charm of the mountains. A wine flag stretched out in a slanted manner, with a huge word written on it. Wine. This place used to be my Lei family's plum forest. Ever since young Miss Bai came here, I gave this plum forest to her. Young Miss Bai is proficient in the art of cooking, and is even more familiar with the way of brewing wine. She can make good dishes. She's really a rare peerless beauty. She's pleasing to the eye and relaxing to look at. During this period of time, I've basically been coming here to drink wine every single day. This is considered as a unique private place. Look at this elegance, this decorations, this exquisite spirit. It's all ingenuity and ingenuity that surpasses the heavens. It's only brother like you. I absolutely won't allow anyone else to come. Miss Bai. I'm here to drink again. Lei Dongtian chattered along the way. In the end, he called out directly. An elegant voice said faintly, "Young Master Lei is really elegant and rich. If it were an ordinary family, young Master Lei would have gone bankrupt long ago." The words were obviously mocking Lei Dongtian for being a prodigal son. He did not hide it at all. Yin Yang's first feeling was that it was going to be bad. Based on his understanding of Lei Dongtian and his way of doing things, he was a person who would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. Hearing such blatant mockery, it would be considered a light punishment if he were to hit him directly. Unexpectedly, Young Master Lei was well-mannered and did not mind it at all. He walked in with a laugh and led Yin Yang straight up to the second floor. They found a small pavilion that was surrounded by thatched grass and sat down, laughing. It's already a great thing to be proud of one's life. Today, I have a good brother coming from afar. It's double happiness. How can I not get drunk? Good wine and good food. Come, come, come. We won't go home until we're drunk today. Let's share the sorrow of eternity. There was a hint of elegance in her words. Even the poem that was tailored was not entirely elegant. The girl's voice snorted again. Then, the sound of pots and spatulas colliding could be heard in the kitchen. I remember Brother Lei saying that the Lei family that you're from is a force in the bound of universe and is quite capable. Yin Yang smiled and said, but I'm afraid it's not at the level where you can rob Daoyuo sect, a middle-class celestial luck banner school. I'm really impressed by what I've seen today. It turns out that Brother Lei has been hiding a lot in front of me back then. Lei Dongtian squinted and chuckled, saying, what do you mean hiding? This foolish brother of mine was like that back then. Now it's just that we've met again in these 2 years. Oh, may I ask what great opportunity my brother has had to change so much? Even if you don't ask, I'll explain it to you in detail. This is a great opportunity for the Lei family. Lei Dongtian laughed. 2 years ago, someone suddenly came looking for us and said that the Lei family is the direct descendant of our elder ancestor, who had wandered outside. Now, of course, we're returning to the family. Later, when we were sorted according to the genealogy, I found out that our elder ancestor has always been alive. Back then, it was only because of some issues of family interests that our ancestor made a mistake and was chased out of the mansion. However, thousands of years have passed. Elder ancestor feels that the family is incomplete and that it's not a good thing for the bloodline to wither. Therefore, he asked us to return to the family. The tree is thousands of feet tall, and the fallen leaves return to their roots. After all, we're of the same breath and branch. Lei Dongtian could not help but look like he wanted to show off. Brother, do you know who our elder ancestor is? A silhouette flashed across Yun Yang's mind, but he still asked, I wonder who the elder ancestor is. Haha, you'll be shocked if I tell you. Lei Dongtian snorted and said proudly, our elder ancestor is actually someone we couldn't even dream of reaching before. The great elder of the Sacred Heart Palace. The 5th most powerful person in the Sacred Heart Palace. Lei Dongtian's face was full of glory and pride. His face was full of pride, and he was in high spirits. Yin Yang's face was also instantly filled with shock. It's actually really unexpected, such a pleasant surprise. However, in his heart he thought, it really is him. So the Lei family has changed so much. It's actually because the great elder of the Sacred Heart Palace has recognized them as relatives. However, there's something strange about this matter. It's understandable that this great elder has survived for thousands of years. But isn't it a little ridiculous to say that he doesn't know that his descendants are outside until now? It's even more ridiculous to say that he wants to recognize them. Wouldn't he have done it a long time ago if he really wanted to? Why did he have to wait until now? Thousands of years have passed, and dozens of people have died. Only now does he want to recognize them. No matter how I think about it, there's something indescribably strange about it. Brother, didn't you say that? I've changed. Lei Dongtian said proudly. I can't not change. Since I've recognized my ancestors, my previous cultivation method is simply sh*t, compared to the elder ancestors' cultivation method. The 7 emotions praxis, and the transplanting of experts remains into the body, are all inferior cultivation methods. How can I not abandon them as soon as possible? Therefore, the entire Lei family has destroyed our original foundation, and recultivated the exclusive Lei family cultivation method passed down by the elder ancestor. That's why I can be so powerful now. I have to say that the elder ancestor's cultivation method is really amazing. This is the cultivation method that is most suitable for the Lei family's direct descendants. Lei Dongtian sighed. It seemed that the change in this fellow's temperament was most likely due to the destruction of the 7 emotions praxis, resulting in a backlash and a sharp change in his temperament. As expected, Lei Dongtian then looked a little bashful and said, Speaking of the 7 emotions praxis, this foolish brother has a great deal of guilt towards you. When I was with you in the past, you were sincere to me, but I had other requests. I harbored evil intentions and plotted against you. The 7 emotions praxis is truly an evil cultivation method, extremely unbearable. When I returned to the family this time, of course, the cultivation method was destroyed at once. However, this cultivation method has a profound effect on one's temperament. Towards the end, he raised his wine goblet in embarrassment and looked at Yun-yang before draining it in one gulp. I knew that this fellow had suffered a backlash. Just from the way he speaks, how can there be no reason? Yun-yang pondered. Back then, Lei Dongtian had secretly schemed to use Yun-yang as a cauldron to cultivate the 7 emotions divine skill. He had already cultivated it to a profound level. He only needed to betray Yun-yang once to cause him heartache, and the path of friendship related to Yun-yang would be considered a success. Lei Dongtian's cultivation base would then advance to another level. Back then, Lei Dongtian had used this cultivation method to suppress the 4 venerable lords of frost, snow, sword and sword. Its power was remarkable, but he was immediately suppressed by Mr. Nian. He was severely injured and had to flee for his life. Naturally, he had no time to target Yun-yang the cauldron. He could only bury Yun-yang's deep friendship with him, and his deep apologies to Yun-yang deep in his heart. After that, the Lei family changed and returned to its roots. The entire family turned to cultivate a brand new cultivation method of a higher level. All the previous cultivation achievements had gone up in flames. It was still unknown if the rest of the Lei family had other hidden dangers, but Lei Dongtian's was obvious. The 7 emotions praxis was based on the heart, so the backlash on the heart was especially severe. Yun-yang had been pretending to be courteous back then, but Lei Dongtian did not know about it. He had truly treated Yun-yang as his bosom friend. Once his cultivation method had backfired, he was filled with remorse for his hypocrisy in the past, and had turned all of it into true feelings, without any pretense. To use an inappropriate analogy, even if Yun-yang were to stab him now, and cause him to go bankrupt and break up his family, even if Yun-yang were to do something to him, he would still think that Yun-yang was his good brother, a brother who treated him with all his heart. He must have his reasons for doing this and treating me like this. I must understand him, cooperate with him, and treat him better. Lei Dongtian was definitely not a good person. Throughout his entire life, he might not even have a bit of sincerity towards his own parents, his wife, and his son. However, there was still one person in this world who could make him give up everything without any regrets. That person was Yun-yang. Chapter 1168. To Lei Dongtian, Yun-yang was now his biological brother. No, what was a biological brother? How could a biological brother compare to a 10,000th of Brother Yin? Brother Yin was irreplaceable and incomparable. He was the love of his life. This was probably Lei Dongtian's mentality. It was also the embodiment of the 7 emotions praxis extremely domineering backlash. Understanding this, Yun-yang was also helpless in this situation. He understood the cause and effect almost instantly. This was the biggest disadvantage of cultivating the arcane method of the mind. There was no need to use his brain at all. This scoundrel had actually treated him as a true friend, a true brother. However, the problem was, Yun-yang did not want to have a brother like him. Putting aside the unresolved grudge with Ji Lingxi, and the fact that Yun-yang had risked being a cultivation vessel, it was impossible for Yun-yang to have a brother like Lei Dongtian with the blood feud of his 6th brother, Supreme Thunder. However, this brotherhood was destined not to last long. Lei Dongtian's current state was due to the backlash of his cultivation method. But once his cultivation reached a certain level, and the backlash of the cultivation method was eliminated, the first person Lei Dongtian would kill would be his brother. He had to ask more questions while this child was still mentally ill. Sigh. Brother Lei, I heard that your Lei family used to have a good-for-nothing, but because his parents were dead, he was chased out of the family 10 years ago, and no one knows where he went. It was said that he had 8 innately awakened chakras, and was gifted. Yun-yang asked. 8 innately awakened chakras? Oh, you mean Lei Mufeng, that good-for-nothing? Lei Dongtian did not take it seriously and said, "There is indeed such a thing. That Trash's natural talent is limited, and his natural endowment is insufficient. Yet he just happened to occupy a position and monopolize resources. My mother and father naturally couldn't stand it. The path of cultivation has always been the survival of the fittest, and the strong come first. That Trash is nothing, yet he still wants to occupy a good position. Isn't that just courting death? Isn't it a matter of course to get rid of him?" Yun Yang's expression remained unchanged as he said, "I see. However, this Lei Mufeng, according to what you said, he should be your cousin?" Lei Dongtian rolled his eyes. "He should be my younger cousin. Brother Yin, why are you so interested in that good-for-nothing?" Yun Yang's eyes were filled with nostalgia as he said, "That was also a very, very good friend of mine." As he said this, Sixth Brother's voice and smile suddenly appeared in his mind. His heart ached. Sixth Brother should be dead in every sense of the word. At the same time, he was staring at Lei Dongtian's face to see if there was any change in his emotions. He was testing the bottom line of Lei Dongtian's tolerance. The countercharge of the cultivation method had caused Lei Dongtian's loyalty to him to deepen, but to what extent, Yin Yang could not predict. He didn't know how long this loyalty would last. "Friend." Lei Dongtian was a little jealous. He snorted and said, "What kind of friend? How could we treat each other with such sincerity?" Yin Yang coughed and said, "Even if there's a gap, it's not that far. I seem to have a special affinity with you lay people." Lei Dongtian laughed. "I think so too." Yin Yang took the opportunity to change the topic. "Your cousin brother, Lei Mufeng, he's not a bad person. When we were together back then, everyone felt that he was a good person. Why was he suddenly chased out?" Lei Dongtian smiled faintly and said, "Character doesn't represent ability." Yin Yang raised his wine cup and said sadly, "Lei Mufeng is dead." Lei Dongtian's eyes shone. "Oh, I couldn't find him for so many years. So he's dead? You're looking for him?" "I'm looking for him to kill him, of course." "Kill him?" Lei Dongtian smiled coldly. "Of course I'm going to kill him. Do you think I'm going to let him come back and take over as the family leader?" Yin Yang feigned an interested expression. "What actually happened back then? Can Brother Lei explain it to me?" Lei Dongtian mused, looking like he was in a difficult position. Yin Yang said, "Lei Mufeng's father was the family leader of the Lei family, wasn't he? Why did both his parents die in one night? Why were they chased out? I feel that there must be a reason for all these." When Yin Yang said this, there was a strong sense of caution in his heart. Would Lei Dongtian have any bad reactions? What if he suspected Yin Yang or attacked him directly? Yin Yang would have to strike first to gain the upper hand. As it turned out, Yin Yang was worrying too much. Lei Dongtian was currently at the peak of his brotherly bond. How could he suspect Yin Yang? He was just hesitating whether he should reveal the family's dark history. After a moment of hesitation, he decided that it was best to be honest with his brother. "How can there be no reason?" Lei Dongtian looked around and said, "Brother, I'm only telling you these words. You must never leak it out." Yin Yang nodded vigorously. "Don't worry, Brother Lei. I won't speak carelessly." Back then, Lei Mufeng's father, Lei Junping, was in charge of the Lei family. I have to say that my second uncle was indeed outstanding. In his hands, the family was thriving day by day. He was a capable man. The Lei family was only a small family with a lower-class celestial luck banner. However, under my second uncle's control, the family's ability grew to the point where it could compete for a middle-class celestial luck banner. There was a high chance that it would succeed. Of course, the old man was jealous. After all, how could he not want to be in this position? So, I used some tricks to make second uncle's family suddenly have an accident, and they died. Since the head of the family is dead, the only one who can inherit the position is my old man. Lei Dongtian said proudly, "Doesn't this mean that we have everything we need?" Yin Yang was puzzled. Since the head of the family is dead, it should be his son who inherits the position, shouldn't it? Lei Dongtian snorted and said, "How could it be his turn? There were many people in his family back then. Lei Mufeng had 2 elder brothers, 1 younger brother, and 1 younger sister. They were all talented martial artists in the family. But in that accident, all of them died a violent death and became corpses. No matter how talented they are just corpses when they die. Lei Mufeng is lucky that he didn't die. Lei Dongtian snorted. Even if he didn't die, it's useless now. He has 8 innately awakened chakras, which is lower than all of us. The old man only used a little trick. The family will rank and eliminate all those who are below 9 innately awakened chakras. We can't waste resources. Lei Mufeng has no chance at all. I have to say, the old man is really King vicious. Lei Dongtian's face was full of admiration. That's how a real man should be. Genius. 1 second to remember this website's address. Mobile version. Chapter 1169. However, your old man's cultivation base shouldn't be as good as the family head's, right? Yin Yang said. In a family like yours, the strong should be respected. Besides, if there were such good conditions back then, why didn't your old man rush up after he inherited the position? Lei Dongtian looked a little embarrassed as he said. Of course, he did it in collaboration with others. It's related to other sects. Yin Yang coughed and rolled his eyes, saying, colluding with external enemies to suppress my own family. How can I get power without paying the price? Lei Dongtian chuckled coldly. However, after Lei Juanping's people were wiped out, the family's strength has regressed a little. Yin Yang sighed inwardly. The family's power struggle had cost them the chance to take a big step forward. This kind of internal strife. Could it be that becoming the family head was more important than the family's rise to the celestial luck banner? A man can't be powerless for a day. Lei Dongtian's eyes were vicious as he drank the wine in one gulp. If I had another chance, the ending would be the same. Yin Yang sighed and nodded deeply. I see. He thought to himself. It seems that 6th brother was lucky to escape death back then, and probably suspected that there was something fishy about his parents' death. However, the main culprit was the Celestial Luck Banner School, an enemy he couldn't shake alone. Naturally, he missed the chance to know that the real murderer was his eldest uncle. Lei Mufeng disappeared from then on. Did no elders in the family speak up for him? Yin Yang asked in surprise. How could anyone speak up for him? Lei Dongtian sneered. Humans are all selfish things. The tea cools when the person is gone. This is how the world works. Helping him is tantamount to offending the Kangwu Union and inviting trouble upon oneself. Who would speak up for a dead family? Who would speak up for a guy who is sure to be useless and has no future? How glorious Lei Mufeng was before. How miserable he was after the incident. What's more, his father's loyal followers have long been drugged and crippled. Hee. Lei Mufeng is smart too. After leaving the family, he immediately concealed his identity and disappeared. I'm very surprised. Lei Dongtian sneered. I think this guy also knows that if he continues to stay here, he will die. So he ran to another place to live. It's just that with his escape, all the arrangements that I've made are completely useless. You've chased me for more than 10 times. Yet you haven't sent back any good news. You can be considered to be very scheming. Yin Yang gritted his teeth and said, I think, since they're already at the end of their tether, there's only one bloodline left. There's nothing wrong with giving them a way out. What's more, they're blood relatives. Lei Dongtian guffawed and pointed a finger at Yin Yang. Brother, oh brother, your way of thinking is commendable to us brothers. But to those who are destined to oppose you, it is only a soft-heartedness. When we roam Jianghu, the biggest taboo is this kind of soft-heartedness. If we don't remove the roots, the weeds will grow again when the spring breeze blows. Yin Yang could not help the sharpness in his eyes. Why do you have to put him to death? After all, he's your cousin. Lei Dongtian smiled eerily and said, If Lei Mufeng doesn't die, it's like a fishbone stuck in my throat. I won't be able to eat or sleep in peace for the rest of my life. Who cares if he's a brother or not? Yin Yang clapped his hands and shouted. Good. What a restless sleep. Your father must have felt the same way back then. After fulfilling his long-cherished wish to take charge of the Lei family, he must have had a grand plan to revitalize the Lei family. Lei Dongtian's expression turned awkward again. The 7-star sect's conduct is extremely unethical. We've agreed that they would not harm the Lei family other than Lei Juanping's family. However, they have privately spread the characteristics of the Lei family's cultivation method everywhere. Lei family's cultivation method is known to outsiders, and they've been continuously stirred up by external enemies. Their power has been continuously damaged. If the Lei family still had the foundation of the past, why would I need to cultivate the evil cultivation method, praxis of 7 emotions? Why would I covet the so-called remains of the God of God? Yunyang thought to himself. Serves you right. After a pause, he continued. Now that Lei Mufeng is dead, brother Lei, you should let go of this worry and sleep in peace. Lei Dongtian laughed and said, Brother, you've brought me good luck. You've lifted the boulder in my heart the moment you arrived. Brother, don't think too much. I'm loyal to you, and will never turn against you. We're brothers who have gone through life and death together. How can others compare to us? Yunyang chuckled and raised his glass. His voice was deep as he said, Of course. We're brothers who have gone through life and death together. Lei Dongtian was overjoyed. Yes, brothers who have gone through life and death together. I like this sentence. Brother, come, let's have a good drink. As your brother, I welcome you to the bound of universe. Lei Dongtian laughed and raised his glass. I especially want to thank you for bringing the news of Lei Mufeng's death. It's a double blessing. I'm very happy. Yunyang smiled knowingly and raised his goblet. With a loud clang, the 2 goblets collided with each other. Both of them drained their glasses in one gulp. Maybe you're in a good mood, Yunyang murmured in his heart. But you've never thought that there are real brothers in this world. 6th brother can't come and collect this debt by himself, but his brother can. This blood debt of the Lei family can't be avoided no matter what. As for the Kangwu Union, you have to pay for what you've done. You've annihilated 6th brother's entire family. Your school, your legacy, should cease to exist as well. Finally, they were drunk in full. Miss Bai had come out as well. She was a beauty in the making, the type that people would want to take pity on. Towards Lei Dongtian, she was inseparable. She was as beautiful as a peach and as cold as frost. Yet, she maintained a subtle distance. She did not let Lei Dongtian take advantage of her, nor did she let him give up. She captivated Lei Dongtian completely. However, Yunyang could tell at a glance that something was amiss. This lady's cultivation base was very high. She had at least reached the standard of a 3rd-level Saint King. Perhaps no one in the entire Lei family could surpass such a cultivation base. Such a lady had hidden her cultivation base and came here to befriend Lei Dongtian. She had even displayed a deliberate charm. What was the reason for this? Yunyang was suspicious, but he smiled and said, Miss Bai is indeed as beautiful as Brother Lei has said, a peerless beauty. Miss Bai smiled and said, Young Master Yin has overpraised me. Bai Zhenjin is only an ordinary lady. I don't deserve such a high compliment. Yunyang laughed, revealing an unruly air as he said, How long has Miss Bai been here? Is there anything you lack in life? Don't be shy. Bai Zhenjin smiled reservedly and said faintly, I've been here for more than 2 years. Thank you for young Master Yun's concern. But, after such a long time, everything necessary for life has long been prepared. One's life in this world is to live a peaceful and joyful life. It's enough as one wishes. Her faint smile was nonchalant, obviously treating Yunyang as a lecherous popinjay like Lei Dongtian. She did not care about him at all. It's been more than 2 years. Yunyang laughed, looking drunk. Brother Lei, you're too slow. It's been 2 years yet, ha. Lei Dongtian blushed. Miss Bai is a fairy incarnate. How can you blaspheme her? Both of them left, laughing. Bai Zhenjin watched the 2 of them leave with a look of disdain on her face. She then turned and said faintly, Why did such a person suddenly appear beside Lei Dongtian? I'm afraid there might be more problems. Investigate. I want to see what kind of person he is. There was a commotion in the shadows, and an ethereal voice said, Have you found anything, miss? Young Master Yin may look like a popinjay, but I feel that his gaze is very sharp. Bai Zhenjin said, Besides, his cultivation base seems to be only at the saint level, but I feel that something is not right. I don't want to make any mistakes, nor do I want any accidents to happen. Something doesn't feel right. The ethereal voice in the shadows murmured, and then disappeared without a trace. The space regained its peace. On the way, Yun-yang asked, "Brother Lei, the Lei family's return to the ancestral home should have happened 2 years ago, right?" Lei Dongtian was not wary of Yun-yang at all, so he answered immediately, "More or less, about 2.5 years ago." In other words, when the Lei family returned, this Miss Bai was already here? Yes, it should have been during the return, Lei Dongtian said uncertainly. Anyway, when Miss Bai came, she took a liking to me. She hasn't left until now. This is the most important thing. Yun-yang chuckled inwardly. Indeed, she has taken a liking to you. I just don't know how old this young Miss Bai. Is she an old demon? Lei Dongtian brought Yun-yang into the Lei family's courtyard, introducing him to everyone he met. This is Yun-yang, my best brother in Tianxian continent. Everyone's gaze was strange, their expression strange. In short, it was extremely strange. Yun-yang could even hear a few people shaking their heads, sighing and murmuring softly. When will this fellow recover from the backlash of his 7 emotions? It's unbelievable. Our young master Lei actually has a brother now. When he gets rid of the backlash of his cultivation method, I wonder how his brother will die. Beaten to death, tortured to death, or toyed with to death. No matter what, he's destined to die a horrible death. Yun-yang sneered inwardly. How would his brother die? Perhaps the Lei family doesn't know yet. But you've already invited the greatest god of death into your home. It's better to worry about how you'll die first. However, there's one thing that's true. You're destined to die a horrible death, that's for sure. Happy face carrot. I've been thinking about what the Lei family should do today. I've thought about it so much that my head hurts. In the end, I've decided to cut the Gordian knot. Chapter 1170. That night, Lei Dongtian once again held a banquet. All the young talents of the Lei family were gathered in the hall without exception. Even the elders of the previous generation were present. For elders of the previous generation were also present at the banquet, drinking a few cups of wine, and exchanging a few pleasantries with Yun-yang. Obviously, this was all for the sake of Lei Dongtian. Lei Dongtian, at least at the current stage of the Lei family, still had considerable prestige. However, was this prestige because of himself, because of his old patriarch, or because of something else? Lei Dongtian sat at the head of the table, looking around proudly, looking down on others as if they were nothing. He pointed at them and introduced them to Yun-yang, asking who this was, and who that was. It felt like he had power in his hands. Looking at the situation, Yun-yang suddenly came to a realization. Lei Dongtian's old patriarch's power in the Lei family had reached its peak. So much so that even he, the young master, had risen. This could be seen from the fact that many people disregarded their status to curry favor with the patriarch's son. Among these people, many of their positions and seniority were higher than Lei Dongtian's, or even much higher. However, it also reflected from another aspect that the entire Lei family had completely decayed. There was no longer the aura of a sect that had once almost touched the celestial luck banner. After getting drunk and eating to their heart's content, it was already midnight. Yun-yang quietly floated out of the room according to the information he had gathered, and drifted to the Lei family's ancestral hall in the backyard. Along the way, Yun-yang, who was unimpeded, felt a little lost. With Yun-yang's current cultivation base, it would not be difficult for him to destroy the Lei family. Even if the Lei family had gained the favor of the Sacred Heart Palace's elder, Yun-yang would not take it to heart. Instead, Yun-yang was worried about how he could help his 6th brother vent his anger, to end this deep-rooted hatred. So what if he offended this great elder to avenge his brother? Yun-yang would not hesitate. However, what Yun-yang was confused about was how to do it. The Lei family is already rotten. They have long stopped caring about the contributions you and your family have made. They have long forgotten the glory of the past. Now, for the sake of their lives, benefits, and status, they can give up everything, be it dignity or anything else. Hoping for them to seek justice for you and your father is just a fool's dream. At this moment in this place, standing in this family, I can't see any persistence of a warrior. I can't see any of the strength and ambition of a cultivator. This place is filthy. Everywhere is filthy. Does such a Lei clan still exist? Is there a need to purge and reform it? Yun Yang kept mumbling to himself in his heart, feeling sorry for his sixth brother, sorry for his sixth brother's parents, sorry for everyone in his sixth brother's lineage. With such a Lei family, what harm would there be in dying? The Lei family yard's rows of houses flitted past under his feet. Even if Yun Yang did not cast the wind cloud manifestation, no one would be able to discover Yun Yang's current whereabouts. Not even a trace of him could be detected. This was the embodiment of the absolute difference in their abilities. Yun Yang could hear the conversations of the people in the house below him. That Yun Yang. I heard that he's Lei Dongtian's friend. And they're as close as brothers. Ha ha ha, I'm dying of laughter. This is enough to make me laugh for a year. How can a year be enough? At least until that Yun Yang dies, right? How do you think Yun Yang will die in the end? Who can guess the exact way he will die? That Lei Dongtian's methods of toying with his targets are getting more and more insane. Thinking about the last victim, it's truly shocking. Right. What was the last time Lei Dongtian suffered a backlash? Was it anger? But that time was short. It was only slightly more than a month before the woman was tortured to death. Then guess, how long does Lei Dongtian need to get rid of the backlash this time? Not necessarily. Maybe it'll be very fast, a few days. Or maybe it'll be very slow. But one thing is for sure, this Yin Yang probably can't leave. Not necessarily. They're treating each other with sincerity now. When Lei Dongtian acts stupidly, he can really be righteous during this period of time. The key point now is no longer Lei Dongtian, but the family leader. He definitely won't let Yin Yang leave. This person is here. If Lei Dongtian kills him, it'll mean that the backlash of the 7 emotions praxis has been completely eliminated. If he were to leave, how can there be any reference? You're right. Without any reference, if Lei Dongtian were to push the cultivation method forward, it'd be too easy for him to go berserk. That's right. Not to mention that the child knows too many secrets that he shouldn't know. Looking at how Lei Dongtian treats him now, he'll reveal everything to him. It'd be considered a light punishment if he didn't tell him anything, so Yun Yang, who was in the air, was dumbfounded as he listened. He froze for a moment. It was only because Yun Yang's current cultivation base was rather impressive, at least much higher than the upper limit of the Lei family's combat power. Otherwise, he would have been discovered long ago. The entire Lei residence was discussing when Lei Dongtian would kill his people. How could there be so many of them? And how could they be so unscrupulous? This kind of feeling, it really seemed to be very strange. Another place that Yin Yang's attention was focused on was probably the residence of the family leader of the Lei residence. A deep voice was speaking. We can't let him escape. Watch him. How can someone who knows too many secrets that he shouldn't know live long? Also gather information about this person. This child isn't born in the bound of universe. He's someone who ascended from the lower realm. If he doesn't have a corresponding skill, how can he ascend in such a short period of cultivation? I have a feeling that this person isn't a good person, especially when he said that he's a friend of the dead Lei Mufeng. Why is he here? It's worth thinking about. Also, is Lei Mufeng really dead? He can't be dead just because he says he's dead. Is there anything unusual in the dungeon? I've already ordered for the dungeon to be doubly vigilant. Nothing must go wrong there. If there's anything unusual, kill them directly. They must not be allowed to come out alive. I want there to be no hidden dangers. Yes, I'm still a little worried. Let's go to the dungeon to take a look. To be fair, their voices were very soft. If one was not nearby, one might not be able to hear them, even if they were to listen attentively. However, Yun Yang's cultivation base was so profound that even if they were to speak softly or speak through telepathy, they would not be able to escape his detection. Thus, the conversation between the two of them could be heard clearly, without a single detail missing. Dungeon. Yun Yang's eyes shone the moment he heard the 2 keywords. He had been troubled by the lack of a breakthrough, and did not know what to do at the moment. The dungeon was exactly what the other party was concerned about. Furthermore, if the person imprisoned in the dungeon was Sixth Brother's family, it would be a wonderful thing for him to rescue them. Without another word, he turned and left. The sinister dungeon was dark and damp, with snakes, insects, and rats slithering about. It was a spine-chilling sight to behold. A few of the dungeon cells were empty. Half of the guards were gathered at the entrance on the surface, while the other half were gathered at the innermost part of the dungeon. The security was tight. However, Yun-yang paid no attention to these guards. He turned into a gust of wind and went straight for the deepest part of the dungeon, especially the few damp and dark cells. Yun-yang came to the end of the dungeon and focused his gaze. The moment he saw it, he could not help but admire this lay family leader's viciousness. Perhaps this fellow was not talented or bold, but when it came to ruthlessness and viciousness, it was infuriating and awe-inspiring. The prisoners in the cells were all on the verge of death. Each of their necks was hung by a chain, and their toes were barely touching the ground. Their shoulder blades had been pierced through, and they were dangling from the left and right sides of their bodies. Even though their shoulders had regained their freedom, they could only use 20% of their normal strength for a short period of time. There was also a thin chain around their waists that pierced through their flesh and wound around their lumbar vertebrae. Not only that, there was a thin chain attached to the top of their skulls, which actually pierced through their skulls and wound around their lumbar vertebrae. Not only that, there was a thin chain attached to the top of their skulls, which actually pierced through their skulls and wound a circle around their lumbar vertebrae. Not only that, there was a thin chain attached to the top of their skulls. Run, run. If you struggle, your skull will fall. If you run, your lumbar vertebrae will break. If you run, your cervical vertebrae will break. What was most infuriating was that the torturer did not lock these people's mystical chi cultivation base. Instead, he allowed these people to breathe and recover on their own. However, no matter how they recuperated and recovered, there were so many shackles on their bodies that they could never break free no matter how high their cultivation base was. If these imprisoned people wanted to live, they could only cultivate and breathe as hard as they could to recover their physical bodies as much as possible. Do you think this is the end? Extreme agony? Obviously not. He had allowed these people to circulate their profound energy and recover their physical bodies. His goal was undoubtedly to let these people live, but more importantly, to let these people live in an even more painful way. Because in the prison cell, there were several white and plump insects. Each of them was fat and big, and looked very clumsy. They did not seem to have much lethality. However, Yin-yang knew about these worms. Spirit-absorbing worms. These worms were known as the mortal enemy and nemesis of all cultivators in this world. There was only one reason for this. These worms could absorb a cultivator's mystical chi, and cause the cultivator's cultivation base to suffer permanent damage that was extremely difficult to recover from. Currently, the few spirit-absorbing worms would crawl to the dantian of these prisoners every once in a while and absorb the mystical chi that the target had painstakingly gathered during this period of time. Even though the absorption capacity of the spirit-absorbing worms was relatively limited and could not absorb all of the prisoners' mystical chi, it was enough to make the prisoners even more stressed and difficult to deal with. Naturally, there would be exhalation when there was absorption. Lay family leader had his own deeper purpose in using the spirit-absorbing worms. After the spirit-absorbing worms had absorbed a sufficient amount of mystical chi, they would excrete a special mystical crystal. This mystical crystal was unique in that it could be absorbed directly and quickly turned into abundant mystical chi that would fill one's meridians and become part of one's own cultivation base. It was more convenient than any spiritual jade. One had to absorb the spiritual chi of the spiritual jade first before cultivating to digest it before turning it into one's own mystical chi. There was a huge difference in the middle. However, the mystical crystal produced by the spirit-absorbing worms was not depleted at all, probably because it was the mystical chi that had been cultivated. In other words, the spirit-absorbing worms were the medium of cultivation-based transfer. However, using such a method to absorb mystical chi to benefit oneself at the expense of others was not something that any cultivator would be happy to see. It was infuriating and intolerable. What was more, this lay family leader was absorbing the mystical chi of his blood brothers and family members. He was simply insane, worse than a pig or a dog. The rage in Yin Yang's eyes was unprecedentedly intense. I'm really innocent. I'm not with Lei Junping. A man who was hung up mumbled in an extremely weak voice. Let me go. I beg you, let me go. I'm really not with Lei Junping. I'm just a martial artist, an ordinary martial artist. I met Lei Junping by chance that day, and I've only seen him once in my entire life. The person was murmuring to himself. The person did not even dare to raise his voice. Once he did, the slightest tremor would cause the torture instruments on his body to work together. He would then be in pain, and his meridians would suffer an excruciating pain that felt like his bones were being crushed. Yet he was still pleading incessantly. After a while, when he could not take it anymore, he would cultivate his cultivation method. Once he regained some strength, he would begin pleading again, and the cycle would repeat itself. The guards around him ignored him coldly, turning a deaf ear to him and a blind eye. Yin Yang took a closer look. There were a total of 3 such cells, placed side by side in the innermost area. Each cell had 2 people, and the cells were connected. There were only 2 bars separating them, but the gap between the bars was wide enough for a cow to walk through. Such an arrangement was obviously meant for the people in the other cells, to clearly see the miserable state of the people in this cell. Of course, the people on the other side could see it as well. What the other party was going through was what he had already gone through, was about to go through, or had been going through. It was undoubtedly a double torture of the mind and body. The person who could come up with such a torturous idea must be the most outstanding genius among the inhumane crowd. Yin Yang gritted his teeth. He was completely able to discern that no matter which one of the 6 people in this prison cell, all of them had long since exceeded the limits of what their bodies could endure, and once they let out their last breath, they would instantly pass away and go to the netherworld. The only thing that kept them alive, the last thing that kept them alive was this cruel torture. In order to endure this torture, they could only wholeheartedly cultivate and extend their lifespan bit by bit, continuing this state of struggling at death's door. In spite of this, the truth was that each of them no longer had the possibility of survival. There was not an ounce of muscle left on these people's bodies, only a layer of pale, wrinkled skin. It was like a textbook example of skin wrapped around bones. Many of the bones that were exposed were grayish-white in color. It was a color that would only appear when the bones had decayed to a certain extent. Perhaps, it should be said that if the chains that tied them up and hung them suddenly disappeared, at least 70% of their bones would have turned into powder the moment they fell to the ground. Upon confirming the situation, Yin Yang felt chills all over his body, a chill rising from his tailbone. This was such a cruel and vicious method. They had tortured these people to this point, and yet they were still alive. As the saying went, one could neither live nor die. This was probably the most they could do. Among the many prisoners, there was a burly man who looked like a burly man. However, at this moment, he looked even more miserable than the others. His entire body was only a piece of wrinkled skin that wrapped around his skeleton-like body. His head was drooping, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. In the entire prison, he was the only one who did not speak a word. It was not only because of his original intention, but also because he was in a coma due to his heavy injuries. Just as Yin Yang was about to step forward to investigate and see if there was anyone who could be saved, he heard a swoosh of air coming from outside. Then a stern voice said, "Any abnormalities?" Reporting to Master, "There are no abnormalities." "All right, the few of you wait outside." Chapter 1171. Yin Yang remained patient and did not move. Then, a flurry of hurried footsteps could be heard. The first to appear at the entrance was a middle-aged man with a square face, big ears, and a stern expression. The man's gaze was cold and sinister. His gait and mannerisms exuded a domineering aura. Yet it could not conceal the eerie aura that flowed throughout him. It was incongruous. Behind him were 2 middle-aged men and 2 youths. One of them was Lei Dongtian. The man in the lead strode to the innermost area and held onto the fence as he looked in. A faint smile hung at the corners of his lips as he spoke slowly. Third great uncle, I'm here to see you. How have you been all this while? The elder, who had been silent with his head drooped, slowly lifted his head. His lifeless eyes focused for a while before he finally saw the face in front of him clearly. His gaze was dazed for a moment before he recognized the man. He actually coughed and laughed out loud. It's Junming. I've been well, I've been well. I've been waiting for you to come. I wanted to see you again. Third great uncle, you've been spending your remaining years here, and you've actually missed me so much. How thoughtful of you. Lei family head Lei Junming smiled warmly. Third great uncle, you've been worried about me indeed. Come to think of it, we've always had the best relationship in the family. This third great uncle chuckled, his gaze strange. Junming, I've never been able to let you go, but it's not because we're close. Then why? Lei Junming asked with a faint smile, seemingly interested. Third great uncle chuckled, his voice weak but filled with indescribable delight. Back then, this old man was in a drunken stupor, and after a ridiculous act, I had an affair with your mother and gave birth to you. Although you didn't suffer any disabilities or defects, this old man always felt that I'd treated you unfairly. Watching you grow up step by step, until the day you ascended to the position of Lei family head, this old man was extremely comforted. Although you're a bastard, you've inherited the Lei family's throne after all. Even if this old man dies, when I meet your father in the afterlife, I can still brag to him. After all, he's been wearing the muddle-headed hat his entire life. He chuckled and said, Junming, no one in the Lei family knows that you're actually a bastard. Before he could finish speaking, Lei Junming had already grabbed the old man's neck. His eyes were ice cold. Old bastard, you're courting death. The third great uncle was strangled by the neck, but he still tried his best to laugh. If I hadn't pitied your mother, and helped your father plant seeds, she wouldn't have been able to raise you. Haha. I made a wrong decision back then, and gave birth to a bastard like you. It's really karma. If I knew this, I wouldn't have acted so recklessly. Even if I let you live, I should have strangled you to death. Cough, cough, cough. At the same time, the four people who were being tortured also opened their mouths and laughed with all their might. Although their voices were extremely weak, the ridicule that came from the bottom of their hearts was incomparably clear. Of course it was fake. However, these people had no other means of revenge. The only way to disgust Lei Junming was to fabricate such a vicious story. The third great uncle didn't care that Lei Junming was strangling his neck. He forced himself to speak. Even if he only had one breath left, he still had to laugh out loud. Lei Junming angrily strangled his neck, killing intent flashing in his eyes. Suddenly he chuckled and relaxed his grip. He said lightly, Third great uncle, for so many years, you've always wanted to provoke me into killing you. But I never did it because you're still of use. But today is different. The third great uncle panted heavily for a long time before he could catch his breath. He asked in surprise, why? Today, I came specially to tell you a piece of good news. There's news of Lei Mufeng, that bastard. Lei Junming laughed coldly. A murky light flashed in the third great uncle's eyes. Oh, you don't have to pretend that you don't care. I know you care. If it wasn't for your interference, that little bastard would have died long ago. Lei Junming said lightly. I already know that he left the family and went to the Tianxian continent. No wonder we couldn't find him. The third great uncle chuckled. Good ability. Even with the entire family's power, he was still able to escape. Good ability, haha. As expected of the patriarch's son. Like father, like son. Lei Junming's eyes were cold as he said indifferently. Yes, he is indeed not bad. However, it is a pity that, this genius of the Lei clan, the successor that third great uncle has been looking forward to, although he did not die in my hands, he has now become a pile of bones. The third great uncle was stunned. He suddenly struggled and roared. Nonsense, that's impossible. Lei Junming took a step back and looked at the third great uncle's agitated expression happily. He said with a face full of smiles, Third great uncle, you don't believe me? I can swear to the heavens that this matter is absolutely true. The third great uncle roared angrily. He won't die. Lei Junming, you bastard, you beast. He used up all the vicious words he could think of and cursed continuously. Third great uncle. Actually, this is really the last time I'm coming to see you. Lei Junming said gently. He took out a cup of spiritual liquid, pinched the third great uncle's chin, and forced it down his throat. As he drank, he said gently, Third great uncle, I'm trying to raise your spirits and extend your life, lest you die just like this. No matter what, I want to take care of you until you're old and dead. The third great uncle coughed nonstop and could not catch his breath. He glared at him angrily, but could not speak for a while. Third great uncle, Lei Mufeng is already dead, and Lei Junping has been dead for many years. Lei Juanming's eyes shone like a venomous snake. He said word by word, I'll ask you one last time. Where is the Lei family's thunder seal? Third great uncle panted as he looked at Lei Junming maliciously. Suddenly, he cackled and said mockingly, Do you think this old man will tell you? I do know where it is, but I'm not telling you. You've tortured me for more than 10 years, but have I told you? I'm at the end of my rope now, and I have no more thoughts. Lei Junming, why don't you guess if I'll tell you? Lei Junming smiled gently and said, Third great uncle, you've forgotten. It's best if you're willing to tell me today. If you're really unwilling, it doesn't matter. You probably don't know yet, but the Lei family has returned to its roots. Guess who our elder ancestor is? The third great uncle's murky eyes widened. Who is it? You know about the Sacred Heart Palace, right? Lei Junming said proudly. The first elder of the Sacred Heart Palace is called Lei Qianli. He's a big shot above the clouds. The third great uncle and the other prisoners were stunned. They stammered. Could it be? That's our elder ancestor. Lei Junming took out a genealogy book. Third great uncle, take a look. I didn't make this up. The third great uncle trembled all over, and suddenly tears streamed down his face. The heavens are blind. They've returned to their roots when you're in power, a beast like you, with such a powerful help. Do you understand now? It's no longer important to me whether I get the thunder seal or not. It's just icing on the cake. Even without that thunder seal, I have the cultivation technique passed down by my elder ancestor. The Lei family's overall strength is advancing at a tremendous pace now, and it won't be long before we return to our peak. By the next Celestial Luck Banner battle at the latest, we'll definitely be able to reach the top and achieve the glory that even Lei Junping failed to achieve back then. It'll be realized in my hands, Lei Junming's. Lei Junming said faintly, I know you don't like me, look down on me, and even hate me. You think I'm scum, worse than pigs and dogs, devoid of conscience. I know all that. But we're still Lei family members, and we share the same bloodline. Those you're looking forward to are all dead. If you don't pass the thunder seal to me, it'll just be gone forever. It won't affect me at all. And the only thing that'll be affected is the loss of our exclusive heritage. Are you willing to accept such an outcome? On the other hand, if you pass the thunder seal to me, even if I'm bad and unworthy, my surname is still Lei. Who knows, one day, there might be someone who fulfills your wish to be the next patriarch. Lei Junming smiled. So please think about it again and give me an answer. This is my last chance, and I won't force it. Third uncle panted and gritted his teeth. Suddenly, he broke 2 of his teeth with a loud thud, and turbid blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. He said miserably, Even if I'm buried in the ground, rotting forever, I'll never tell you where the thunder seal is. You should give up on that idea. The old man struggled fiercely, blood splattering all over his body. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Ha ha ha, Lei Junming chuckled. Old thing. You don't think I care about that? He snorted and waved his hand. It's fine if there's no movement. But if there is, I'll kill them first. With that, he turned around and left. However, at this moment, a gloomy voice suddenly rang out. You want to leave just like that? Heaven is watching what you do. You've done too many bad things and karma will come. Lei Junming, your retribution is here. Before he finished speaking, a tall and handsome figure suddenly appeared in this gloomy prison cell. The newcomer was tall and handsome. At a glance, he looked similar to Lei Junming, and even more similar to Lei Dongtian. Lei Junming took a step back, frowned, and asked in surprise, Who are you? The figure smiled faintly. Uncle, don't you recognize me? I'm the nephew that you said was dead, Lei Mufeng. Lei Junming squinted his eyes and said lightly, Imposter, you're talking nonsense. Kill him, no mercy. Without any explanation, he gave the order to kill. At the same time, his body suddenly retreated, and a powerful palm strike landed on third uncle and the others in the cell. He did not care whether it was real or not. He wanted to kill third uncle and the others first. The surrounding cultivators quickly surrounded Lei Mufeng, who had suddenly appeared, and attacked him as a group. The Lei Mufeng who had suddenly appeared was, of course, Yin Yang in disguise. After much thought, Yin Yang decided to use the identity of his sixth brother, Supreme Thunder, to solve the Lei family's matter. Although he had never seen Supreme Thunder's true face, everyone who knew about Lei Mufeng's true appearance would only know him as his sixth brother when he was young. Yin Yang's current appearance, with a slight alteration of Lei Junming and his son's appearance, was more than enough. After all, they were blood relatives. There must be some similarities in their appearances, enough to fool others. I Lei Mufeng am back. Today, blood shall be paid with blood. Yin Yang roared towards the sky. Sixth brother, today, this young brother will avenge you and vent your anger. Suddenly, a boundless murderous aura descended upon them. The entire dungeon instantly made everyone feel as though there was no daylight. Looking at the 5 to 6 practitioners who were charging at him from all directions, Yin Yang snorted coldly, his gaze turning colder. With a wave of his hand, a saber light appeared in his hand and circled the area like a bolt of lightning. All the practitioners who charged at him were sliced into halves without exception. The dungeon was filled with the stench of blood, and the glow of blood was everywhere. Almost at the same time, another ray of saber light flew over and forcefully broke through Lei Junming's powerful palm strike, and directly chopped off his right hand. Lei Junming screamed miserably and staggered back with a pale face. It took him a lot of effort to stabilize his body. Just as he steadied himself, the saber light continued to flicker. The 4 people who came with Lei Junming were all killed by the saber light. Lei Dongtian, who was the first to bear the brunt of the attack, had both his legs chopped off. He rolled around on the ground, howling in agony. The other 3 were the same. Their 8 legs were still standing on the ground, but their owners were rolling back and forth on the ground. Their voices were as shrill as pigs being slaughtered. Then, with another flash of saber light, the guards in the dungeon were decapitated. After Yin Yang had dealt with all the enemies, he entered the dungeon in a flash. Saber light flickered continuously, as the chains that bound the prisoners were all severed without exception. Amidst the crimson light, Yin Yang was like a god of death that had suddenly descended upon the mortal realm. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.